Okay. We'll call the workshop meeting to order. We'll start with the pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Kate, I'd ask you to do the roll call, please. You're muted, Kate.
Councilman Coleman.
Here.
Councilwoman Anawan.
Here.
Councilman Paddock.
Here.
Councilwoman Smeeseth.
Here.
Supervisor Baden.
Here. Okay.
I'm sorry, Mike, do you have your recording going again?
We will get it going. Thank you. Okay, this meeting is being live streamed on YouTube. We will start with a resolution of acceptance of the agenda as prepared by the town supervisor. Do I have that motion?
I'll make the motion.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any additions? Okay. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Okay. So tonight we are holding interviews for boards and commissions. So our first interviewee has arrived already, Clayton. We'll get you to unmute. Welcome, Clayton. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Thank you for joining us. I've sent your resume to all the board members and your application. Thank you for that. Clayton is applying for the Zoning Board of Appeals. And we've got sort of 5 generic questions that we're going to ask each applicant. But first, I just wanted to let you give you a minute to just tell us about yourself and what why you'd like to be on the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Well, quickly, having spent 26 years in the Department of Corrections, it was a very busy career, especially over the last 2 years of my career. Now that I'm retired, it affords me the opportunity to provide more for the town of Rochester. And one of the places that I think I could fit is the Zoning Board of Appeals. I have a slight background in building itself. I'm also a property owner in the town of Rochester. I was kind of steeped in the whole system involving the Zoning Board of Appeals since I was a child. So hopefully I can provide some type of insight, fair assessment of people's needs being on the board. And I appreciate the opportunity to present myself.
I apologize. It's cutting in just a little bit in and out, but we're getting most of what you're saying. So I'll start with the first question is, just sort of in your own words, what is the role of the Zoning Board of Appeals in town government?
It's a combination of things. Primarily, I believe it's an avenue for people to seek out resolution to their needs and accomplishments, trying to establish maybe and maintain some historical integrity through that avenue, maintaining boundary, if you will, surrounding landowners when people are looking for and to help provide them with, like I said, resolution to their
Okay. Our second question is, the ZBA determines when, why, and how the laws may be varied. What information do you consider important in your forming that decision?
Oh my goodness, that's probably the easiest question you can give me. It goes right back to my training with the department, the who, what, where, when, and why. They have to establish a reason and a solid reason and what they hope to accomplish by that variance, if you will, or that need for the Zoning Board of Appeals. Also, above and beyond that is it gives them an avenue to what's their opinion and maybe give them some closure on what they're looking for. So basically it's the who, what, where, when, and why. What do they need and why do they need it? And who are they going to impact?
Okay, next, and you have already touched a little bit on this, but describe your experiences and what skills you would bring to the ZBA.
Skills. Well, let's talk about my role in the Department of Corrections, because that's primarily what was on my resume. And then I'll touch on my college experience. I was fortunate enough to be put in charge of a maximum security facility on several occasions, both starting at Attica Correctional Facility and then here in Napanock at Eastern Correctional Facility. My supervising skills involved the oversight of approximately 600 employees, both civilian support staff and security staff. I also conducted hearings in dealing with Tier 3 hearings, which is the highest discretion or transgression. I conducted several of those and rendered decisions on that. I've appeared in courts several occasions, outside court, pending charges for inmates. And then I'll go into my college experience. While I was in college, I was also in charge of the computer lab at SUNY Ulster. So I had an extensive computer background, which unfortunately over 26 years, it's rendered itself today's technology, but it's still some type of background. So basically, I also have a small background in building. I worked part-time as a builder from the time I was 16 years old, right on through when I was with the. I have some understanding there. Hopefully that answers some of the questions. Just a little insight in my background.
Okay, our next question, and I'm certain with your background, you will know the answer to this, but are you familiar with the oath of office and the public officers law of New York State?
I've taken several of them, yes. And you have to take one when you first join the Department of Corrections, and then you have to be sworn in again as a captain with the Department of Corrections. So yes, I'm very familiar with that.
Okay.
And
And
obviously,
then,
no
oh,
problem.
sorry, go ahead.
And I have no problem adhering to them.
Great. And finally, and then I'll give each of the board members the opportunity to do some follow-up. Are you comfortable with following rules, even if they differ with your personal opinions?
Yes, because without rules, none of this works. You have to have a baseline. You have to have rules in place. Some things with the Department of Corrections I didn't necessarily agree with, but I was put in task of.
Oh, I'm
following
sorry.
rules.
It's your mic is cutting in and out a little bit here.
All right, let me try this again. I have no problem adhering to rules when they're established. If you don't do that, this whole thing doesn't work. You have to have rules. You may not necessarily agree with the rules, but you have to follow them. There's some times where maybe change needs to be made, but there's a time and a place for that.
Okay. Thank you for those answers. Let me open it up to the board members. Does anyone have any follow-up questions or further questions? Adam?
Yeah, I was going to say, do we want to go in any order or just shout out?
Why don't you go first since you spoke up?
Clayton, just one quick question. Do you feel that you can execute the role of the ZBA in a pandemic environment, gaining enough, evidence, through the Zoom meetings and the way we're currently structured to effectively render ZBA decisions?
Well, I can tell you this much, absolutely. And I can tell you from experience with the Department of Corrections, when the pandemic first kicked off, we were instrumental in starting the Zoom meeting system with the department, especially Eastern in connection with Albany. We were the ones that implemented that. We started all the trace contact. We started all the decision making based on not face-to-face meetings, but meetings over the internet. Not necessarily Zoom, because we had a closed system. We weren't able to use Zoom, but we used some. Absolutely.
Gotcha. Thank you, Clayton.
Okay. Aaron, I'll go to you next.
Yes. Hi, Clayton. Thanks
Aaron.
for applying. You kind of touched on this, but I have my standard question is, how do you see the role of variances with regard to the balance of the town?
unfortunately will never be up to just me. Or fortunately, it'll never be up to just me. That's why you have a board. I think once again, we'll touch on balance. You have to make a balanced decision based on how it will affect the future and the people applying and the surrounding people of the person applying. You have to maintain balance. You have to consider all avenues. If you don't, it's not fair to anybody, and it's not fair to the town. And I put it in my application. I believe that the most important thing is historical integrity. Whether or not that implies I'm stuck in the past, I don't know. But I would think that balance is the most important thing. Hopefully that answers your question.
Okay, Michael, I'm just going to the next person on my screen, so.
Yeah, hi Clayton. Appreciate
Hey, Michael, how are
your
you?
time and applying. Great, thanks.
My pleasure.
Yeah, so I actually want to touch on what you just said. Obviously the town has a comprehensive plan. I think, preservation of character of the town is important there. So when you talk about the historical integrity of the town, what do you see as important with respect to historical integrity? What are the things that you think need to be preserved, or what are your priorities for the town?
Well, priorities, I've never really thought that far in advance. I mean, it's a come as you go type situation. I believe one of the strengths in this area, the town of Rochester, established by the D&H Canal and the O&W Railroad. So, you can't lose sight of those things, which are instrumental in things like the rail trail. I mean, that wouldn't be in place if it weren't for a railroad company establishing themselves in the early 1900s. I think a lot of the buildings in the area are being lost over time or being overdeveloped. I think a lot of the land, there's a lot of history people aren't aware of, and this land is disappearing fast. So I think at times there's a need to pump the brakes and get people to realize, hey, we realize it might impact you a little bit now, but it's going to impact a lot of people in the future. But having said that, I think there's time and place for moving forward too. I don't think we stop. I don't think we rest solely on the past. I think we need to look at the prime example is what's going to occur in Accord. You're dealing with a situation in Accord that, unless it's planned properly, get out of control very, very fast. It can gain momentum that just can't be stopped. And I think that's where the Zoning Board of Appeals plays an instrumental part in pumping the brakes when necessary and allowing advancement when it's necessary. I mean, I don't know that I have any one priority in maintaining a certain historical integrity. I think it's all important and it all needs to be reviewed. Hopefully that answered your question. I mean,
Yeah, it absolutely did. Thank you.
And Charlotte.
I think you guys all touched base on what questions I had originally after the first few. So thank you so much for meeting with us and applying, Clayton.
No problem, Charlotte.
Oh, okay. Clayton, thank you very much. To fill
My
you in,
pleasure.
the board will be making a decision at our February 3rd town board meeting. We have, just so you're aware, we have 6 people applying. We have 2 open positions, one for a full 5-year term and one for the filling of a person who decided to resign. And I'm not 100% certain of the duration of that term. My apologies, but we'll be filling 2 seats and we'll be making that decision on February 3rd.
I look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your
My
time and
pleasure.
thank you for applying. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Clayton.
Okay. For the board, our next person to apply has not arrived yet. We do have one person in the waiting room who is much later. I'm a little reluctant to go jump out of order because I think it'll throw us. We're on a pretty tight every 15 minutes. So I think if we jump out of order, we'll put ourselves behind. So we will just wait for a few moments to see if that next person arrives. Okay, good evening, Rob. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you, Mike? Hello,
Great.
everyone.
For the board, this is our next applicant for the Zoning Board of Appeals, Rob Kilpert. Rob, what we're going to do is we'll give you a moment to just give us a quick analysis of why you are applying, and everybody's been given a copy of your resume that you originally submitted. So they have that. And then we have 5 standard questions that we're asking every person who's applying. And then I'll give each of the board members an opportunity for a follow-up question. So if you want to start and just give us a minute or two about your background and why you want to apply.
Well, I feel I have very strong public service experience. I worked at the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, as my resume attests. I recently completed the zoning review board, so I'm familiar with the codes in the town, building code, and important documents that the town relies on. I have an engineering background, so I'm pretty capable of understanding technical aspects, and I'm available at this point to contribute my efforts for this purpose, public service. So that's why I'm applying.
Okay. Thank you for that. So let me start with the 5 questions. So question number 1 is, what is the role of the Zoning Board of Appeals in town government?
Well, the town has existing laws, and the Zoning Board of Appeals handles residents and business issues associated with not conflicts with the law, but just, exceptions, I guess. And so the Zoning Board of Appeals would be to compare what the zoning code states, which is the law, and make a determination as to whether the applicant, satisfies, what the law, is aimed at, or finding exceptions that might apply for that particular applicant.
Okay. So question number 2 is, the ZBA determines when, why, and how the laws may be varied. What information do you consider important when you're forming that decision?
Well, it depends on who the applicant is. If it's a homeowner, I mean, there's certain, residential requirements such as setbacks and fence height requirements, and other, specific code related issues. If it's a business, there's more questions I feel are necessary. I mean, what are the future prospects of that business? What are volumes associated with that business? What impact that business has with respect to meeting comprehensive goal requirements? What impact that business may have on residential issues, if it's a business in a residential area. So there's a lot to be considered for sure.
Okay. Next, and we've already sort of touched on this, but describe your experiences and what skills you would bring to the ZBA.
Well, I think my familiarity with facility and operational requirements at the Port Authority would give me a sense of what an applicant is proposing. I am familiar with architectural drawings and how to evaluate, measurements associated with any proposed business. I know from my auditing experience, there's a lot of research that can be done regarding other businesses that are similar to a business, if that's what's done. I've participated in a lot of DEC online course work and to learn what other towns are doing is important and also a good precedent to hold on to. And, I would look for those areas. In addition to what other resources other members of the Zoning Board of Appeals has relied on or recommends.
Okay. The next is, are you familiar with the oath of office and the public officers law of New York State?
Not specifically, but I've heard about it. I've heard that, you have to swear to, whatever, be a good public employee and, observe rules and regulations associated with town
Yeah.
government.
I put this in more as a sort of a reminder to people, as a member, an appointed member of a board, you are a town officer. And with that, you must take an oath of office, which our former town clerk who passed away would remind me that it's the same oath that George Washington took. Word for word. It hasn't changed. It's that's always kind of fun to say. And
Well,
you
that's
are
good
also
news.
bound by public officers law of New York State as an officer of the town. So it's more an opportunity for me to say, just remind people that there are laws, even as a volunteer, there are laws and rules that you must abide by. And that sort of leads into the next question is, are you comfortable with following rules, even if they differ from your personal opinions?
Of course, this is professional business, right? I mean, we're interpreting the laws, not interpreting what our wishes are or our hopes are. And so to assess what the code asks for or how it can be interpreted is very different than what I have in mind or what I would want.
Okay, let me let the board members now do follow-up, and then I'm going to go backwards this time. So Charlotte, we'll give you the first opportunity this time.
Thanks. So first of all, thank you, Rob, for taking the time and applying. I guess my question would be, I'm going to kind of steal Michael's from last time. What would be your main goals, seeing moving forward for the town, being on the ZBA?
Well, I think that the comprehensive plan is a very important document and certainly outlines the wishes for the town in the future. And so to evaluate all applicants with respect to how it weighs in on the comprehensive plan is very important. That's what I see is the goal of really any public official, right? I mean, we have to, please the residents and the businesses that are in our town, so.
Okay, Michael Coleman.
Hey Rob, good to see you. Appreciate you applying for this. I guess I'm curious and building on Charlotte's question. What concerns do you have, or what do you see in terms of the town? I like what you're saying in terms of the distinction between residential and business priorities. What concerns do you see that you think the town needs to be focused on in terms of land use and planning in the coming decade?
Coming decade. Well, certainly as we're experiencing more and more growth and new influx of homeowners and business owners, the concept of incompatible uses comes up, I think, a lot. And certainly from my experience of reaching out to the residents, there's issues associated with, maybe some businesses are going a little too far. So I don't know, that is an aspect that really needs to be weighed heavily. Is a use of a particular property appropriate for the zone? And is it appropriate for the residents that are surrounding that? And I think that that should be a high priority because we want to have happy residents in our town. And so that I think would go a long way.
Thank you.
Okay, Aaron.
Hi, Rob. Good to see you. So when you were talking about the zoning board of appeals, I think you used the word exception to the zoning code, and we use the word variance for that. So
Yes,
that's the variance. So how do you see variances as a fitting into the balance of what you've just been discussing?
Well, an applicant would propose a variance, something different than what is existing in the code. And so to keep the peace, yes, there would be as much agreement as possible to permit that applicant to go forward. But at the same time, there might be some aspect of negotiation, maybe not exactly what the applicant is asking for. And it would be up, I would think it's up to the zoning board of appeals to determine, is this variance applicable? And so, and honestly, having spoken with Bruce and also, forget his name, guy with a ponytail who wouldn't stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I know him. His name will come to me. But there are times where the zone of boarding appeals, refuses an applicant because it doesn't meet the requirements of a variance. So so I guess it's something that really has to be weighed and looked into.
Okay, Adam.
No, thank you very much for taking time with us tonight. I truly appreciate it, especially doing the the homework on the completing the DEC law and the other town laws. So I appreciate that. My question for you though is, do you feel that you can effectively execute the role of a ZBA member in this pandemic environment and gain enough evidence to effectively render decisions?
Absolutely. There's plenty of online perspectives to look and see what other towns are doing or how they have handled these problems, or reach out to other contacts that have experienced the same sort of issues that need to be resolved. And there's plenty of, municipal, newsletters or things to kind of pay attention to see what is happening in other towns. And I don't know, there's nothing safe like it's been done someplace else, right? We don't want to reinvent wheels or, be on the cutting edge of everything. But I feel comfortable that I can, gather enough information to kind of weigh in importantly on issues that are important.
Thank you.
Okay, Rob, we thank you for your time. To fill you in, there are 6 people applying for the Zoning Board of Appeals. There are 2 positions that we will be filling. One is for a full 5-year term and the other is a partial term of somebody who resigned. We'll be making our decision at the February 3rd town board meeting. So I just thank you. We thank you for your application. We thank you for joining us tonight. And we will be letting you know. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. Good night, everyone.
Good night. Thank you. Okay, moving on next, we have Zachary Jarvis, who is applying for the planning board. Get him connected. There he is. Good evening, Zach. How are you? Oh, you're muted.
How's it going?
There we go. We got you. For the board members, Zach is our current planning board alternate. He has served, I believe, 1 year in that term. Zach, just to let you know, the meeting is being live streamed out on YouTube. I just wanted to make you aware of that.
Okay.
We will invite you to give us a little bit of your background, and then I have 5 standard questions that we're asking each applicant. And then I'll give each board member the opportunity for a follow-up question for you. So we've got about 15 minutes allotted for your time. So why don't you start with giving us a little bit of your background?
Yeah, so I'm from the area. I've grown up here, lived here my whole life in the town of Rochester. I'm currently a realtor for Berkshire Hathaway Nutshell Realty in High Falls. And I've been the alternate member on the planning board for a year now. I've had perfect attendance at every meeting, attended every site visit with the planning board, and I'm always ready to step in whenever needed with that. I am in favor of our current chair, Rick Jones, and his ideologies towards our community and willingness to help the applicant. Some things that I've realized that I would do to improve the planning board if I obtain the seat on the board is I would help, with communication with our applicants, because sometimes people seem to be a little confused and nervous with who they're dealing with. I am an active member in our community, and I'm familiar with a lot of the families that come forward and apply with projects and everything towards the planning board. So I feel like if I were to be on the board, they would come through. I'd be somebody they feel comfortable talking with and, work closely with me and trust the process. And, I would make it as smooth with them. Something else I do is, prior to every meeting, I look through the files on the Google Drive, take a look at closely the applicants and what they've submitted. I also do drive around and drive past the properties that are up on the board's agenda, just so I have a general idea of, the location, what the land looks like and everything. So in the event of me stepping in, I also have that background knowledge. I work a lot with land when I do real estate also, which also helps me understand, topography and areas that may be a concern for future projects that may come towards the planning board. So that's also something that, I do.
For the new board members' knowledge, the alternate member is a member who has to be prepared at every meeting to step in at a moment's notice, but they're not allowed by law to participate unless they're called in to be seated on the board. So it's a very difficult role because you show up every meeting prepared, and many times you have to sort of sit off to the side, and Adam can speak to it. He was an alternate member, I believe, before he joined the planning board. So Zach, our first question, and you really touched on this already, but what's the role of the planning board in town government?
Basically, the role of them is to oversee the projects that are coming through to the town, subdivisions and everything, and help protect and keep the land, that should be protected under our restrictions safe from further development.
Okay. Question number 2 is, what is land use planning? What does that term mean to you?
Land use planning as far as, can you be more specific?
In terms of how it applies with the planning board.
Right. So basically that would be how they move forward and with their projects, like the placement of further homes, septic systems and everything, and what they're going to use the land for, whether it's special use or residential use.
Okay, and then next we asked that you describe, and you've really touched on this already, but describe your experiences and what skill set you would bring to the planning board.
I mean, I would definitely, my experience as the alternate position, and the skill set that I would bring is, mainly communication to our applicants. Like I've touched upon, I've been very familiar with some of the families that come to the planning board who've been in the local community for a very long time, local farmers, builders, construction workers, and just our residential people who live here. I used to work in banking locally, which, people trusted me with and felt comfortable talking to me also there. And real estate is the same way. I help people with their largest assets, whether it's buying or selling, and people really confide in me and talk to me about things. So I can adapt to them on that personal level, which is good, seeing a familiar face with a board.
Okay, our next question, and are you familiar with the oath of office and the public officers law of New York State? And as an alternate member, you've already had to deal with this, but it's one of our standard questions, so.
Yes, I took an oath of office when I became the alternate member, so I'm familiar with that.
Okay. And then question number 5, are you comfortable with following rules, even if they differ with your personal opinions?
Yes.
Okay. So let each of the board members, Erin, we'll start with you this time.
Sure. Hi, Zachary. It's good to see
Hey.
you.
Good to see you too.
Yeah, because you've been the alternate, I'm curious to hear if there's been any issues or things that have been particularly interesting or challenging for you to digest and think about as if you were on the board.
Yeah, I mean, some issues that I've realized that, is hard for me to digest while I'm on the board is the actions of some of our members that are currently on the board. I feel like some members on the board aren't really familiar with the code that we use. They're also not familiar with the projects themselves as they come in. They don't have, very good attendance on the board with meetings and everything. So sometimes they lose track of what's going on. So that's like my biggest flaw. I feel like sometimes people just have a hard time from, where we are at. And some people also can't seem to separate their personal opinions with other projects that are brought in front of us compared to what is the law and the restrictions.
Okay. Michael, we'll go to you next.
Hey, Zach, appreciate you applying for this position. Erin kind of took my question. I was going to ask if there was anything about being on the planning board that surprised you, but I'll revert back to something I've been asking other candidates. You've lived in town a long time. A lot of people here. What do you kind of see as priorities for the town? Obviously, you work in real estate, so there's a huge influx of people coming into town, and
Yeah.
Properties are getting more and more expensive. What do you think some of the priorities are for the town in terms of thinking through land use and how the town should develop over the next few years?
I always like to see development, especially in town of Rochester, where I feel in some places, it's been lacking over the past couple of years. But I also think that it's important that we follow our rules, guidelines, and laws while we develop the town and the land in the area, because I think that's also a big important factor of what makes the town of Rochester the town of Rochester.
Okay. Charlotte, we'll go to you next.
Hi, Zach. Thanks for applying. And thank you for your service so far as the alternate. What do you think is the most important aspect of the planning board's job for the balance of town?
I think it's to get our community to understand why we're here and that we're here to help them and improve the town of Rochester, that we're not here to work against them in any way, but it's important that we do it in the right way.
Okay, and Adam?
Yeah, Zach, thanks for taking time with us tonight. I really appreciate it. A couple of things. Number one is a former planning board alternate who did spend an entire year preparing for every meeting and only to be seated once. I can appreciate your self-discipline, your diligence. My question is it would have never occurred to me to leave the alternate position and move over to the ZBA. What's motivating you to switch?
No, he's not moving to the ZBA. He's applying for the planning board, Adam.
Oh, my absolute apologies.
Yeah,
This makes
yeah.
a heck of a lot more sense to me than right
Yeah.
now. I'm sitting there and
Don't
going,
worry.
after a year sitting there and learning everything, now to shift over.
No,
Okay,
he's
great.
applying for the planning board.
Yep.
So
And even when
actually, I
applied-
have absolutely zero questions then. So
Okay.
good luck to you.
Thank you.
Okay. Zach, thank you for your time. The board will be deciding this at our February 3rd meeting.
Okay.
We have one seat to fill,
Yeah.
and we have 4 applicants for that seat. So we will we'll be deliberating, and then we'll make an announcement at our February 3rd meeting.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Have a good evening. We
Have a good
appreciate
evening.
your time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Apologies, Mike, when we were, I didn't realize we weren't doing all the commissions in order. And
No, well, I started out that way, and then I got a bunch of applications last week after I had already booked people for times. So it started out in an order of some, semblance of order, and then got a little out of whack as applications came in. So
Not a problem. My apologies. I'll be more diligent. Sorry about
our
that.
next person is another planning board, but I'm not seeing them here yet. I do see our 7:35 is here, but we're about 15 minutes ahead of that. So
We still have 2 minutes of open mic, right?
yeah, essentially.
Can we do
Essentially.
performances?
Also, it looks like we lost Kate. Is she in the waiting room?
She's not. She
Okay.
told me that I did tell her that during the interviews, there was not really necessary that she remain.
Got
And I'll text her when we get back to, so she may have dropped out off the meeting for that.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, it is being recorded, and she will be able to get the minutes off the YouTube and off the recording, so. So we'll just take this brief pause while we wait for the next person.
You don't want a solo performance?
You want to practice his stand-up comedy routine, maybe?
I can do Guys and Dolls. I can,
Well, Broadway needs a lot of understudies these days.
It's been a long time since I was on stage.
One of my friends on the Broadway crew posted the other day on Facebook, they had 8 understudies on at the same time on their show. They had people coming in from the national tours to fill in. They were all over the place and pulled it off, and nobody knew the difference. Well, I'm sure somebody knew the difference, but
The show must go on, right?
absolutely.
All you need is somebody to open the curtain. That's it.
Yeah. Do we want him? Oh, here we go. There he is. Perfect. Welcome, Zach. We'll get him connected to audio.
Hello.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Thank you for joining us. So Zach Kleinhandler has applied for the planning board position. Zach, what we'll do is we're going to give you a minute or two to just tell us about yourself and your background. Then we have 5 standard questions we're asking each applicant, depending on the position. And then I'll give each board member a chance at a follow-up question, and we'll have about 10 to 15 minutes of interview. So why don't you start out by just telling us why you're interested in the position and your background.
Of course. Well, first, thank you everybody for giving me the opportunity tonight to at least apply for the position and speak my case. So I've been living in Accord. I have a house on Airport Road for about the past 7 years. Before that, I was in Hurley. I'm a real estate developer by trade, where I do mostly real estate development in New York City, Los Angeles, Seattle, and Chicago. I'm also doing a project in Gardner right now, which will be done in August. And I also sit on the 2 boards appointed by Pat Ryan, Ulster County Executive. One is the Ulster County Economic Development Alliance. And there we are a local development corporation. So basically a for-profit corporation run by, for the benefit of Ulster County. Our biggest responsibility right now is Tech City and Enterprise City West. I also sit on the board of the Enterprise City West Advisory Committee. And our job there is to evaluate opportunities to revitalize IBM's campus. I also helped in the negotiations for the East Campus, which was recently taken over by a developer who will hopefully help revitalize the town of Ulster, Ulster County, and the surrounding areas, including Kingston. And we're now slowly making our way with Enterprise West. Hopefully we'll have a good announcement in the next month or so. But that also will be kind of an opportunity for us to fulfill the obligation of our entity, which is to both increase affordable housing, bring new business, and also service the largest business area of Ulster County, which is agriculture. So that's me.
Okay. So we'll start out with the 5 questions. The first is, what is the role of the planning board in town government?
Well, from my understanding, other than obviously what I could just repeat from reading the brief blurb on the website, would be really the evaluation of specific either special use requests where the planning board would be taking lead agency for something like that instead of the town board, to evaluate potential projects in the town, or even individuals who are requesting changes to what's normally allowed within the town, even for their own, personal homes or for a business. Yeah.
Okay. Next question is, what does land use planning mean to you?
Well, to me, I can speak for hours about what, in my mind, what land use planning is. I mean, really just to get straight to it is, I think that the planning board has a unique opportunity, especially when it comes to land use planning. And this is my personal opinion, so I'm going to be straightforward and, people can take it or leave it. I think it's a unique position because it's the intersection of trying to advance what a town might need and planning different zoning or even variances for zoning in order to help a town grow commercially. But I genuinely believe the planning board needs to do it in a way that is sensitive to what's there now, to the needs of the people who are there now, and not just simply to advance what a business might be asking for, to try and do it. And that's what I think land use planning is, to try and do it in a sensitive way that addresses everybody's needs. Both will benefit the community economically, but also benefit the community socially and its long-term goals there, and help preserve what makes a community special and what brings people to that community in the first place, not losing that. Yeah.
Okay. You've already sort of touched on this, but describe your experiences and what skill set you would bring to the planning board. Right.
Well, I said this to some members of the legislature when I was talking about Ulster County and Economic Development Alliance. And the first thing is I'm a pretty quick study. I mean, if you're going to ask me, do I know all of the town code and all the planning rules and all that? I don't. But I know it for New York City, and I could read it and I could learn it for the town. But I think my unique position is and I've demonstrated this with UCEDA, is that I can understand balancing what I'd said previously, which is balancing the community needs and listening to what the community wants and their needs, because I cannot say that I speak for the community, and what is allowed and what could also be beneficial. And then also as a real estate developer, and this is what I said to the Ulster County legislature, some of the members, was I think the planning board, or in this case it was UCEDA, but I think the planning board could benefit from someone like me because I am a real estate developer, and there's always good to have somebody on your side who knows what the people on the other side of the table are trying to do, both because I think it will make people want to come in if they understand there's somebody across the table who understands what they're saying, but also somebody who knows the kind of tricks that people might try and pull. You know, I would say it's like to protect. I think I could do a good job of protecting people from people like me. Is a good example.
Okay. Next question. Are you familiar with the oath of office and the public officers law of New York State?
When you say familiar, obviously I'm not well versed, and I haven't read all of it.
And
But-
I will say it's a little bit of a trick question. It's more an awareness. It's the opportunity for me to tell you that as an appointee of the town, you are bound, you must take an oath of office. You are bound, you become an officer of the town, even though it's a volunteer position. You are a representative of the town. You must adhere to the public officers law. It is quite substantial. Much of it doesn't apply to these particular positions. And as I said, you do take an oath of office when you are appointed. So
Right.
it's more to just see if people have a familiarity with it, if they've maybe done their homework and
Right.
just
Well,
say,
I could tell you is that I would act in the interest of the town and not in the interest of myself. I mean, by sitting on the Ulster County Economic Development Alliance, not to harp on that position, but I did, as a real estate developer, give up, you know, pretty substantial opportunities that are happening within Ulster County that Ulster County oversees, that I will never be able to do. But to me, protecting the community and the written laws and established codes of the county mean immensely more to me than any profit that I could make, especially taking advantage of a position. It's not even, you know, given what I do in New York City, it's not even worth trying to take advantage of a position. But I would never do that as a person anyway. So.
okay. And the last question, are you comfortable with following rules, even if they may differ from your personal opinions?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that's, to me, is the most important thing. And I think that's where a lot of people in government are, you know, sorely mistaken, is that there are rules that people need to abide by, and but personal opinion does not period change what rules you can and cannot follow.
Okay, let me open it up to the board. We'll start with Michael this time. We'll give him first shot.
Trying to keep me on balance tonight. Hey, Zach, thank you.
Hey, Michael.
I
Thank
keep
you
mixing
for-
up the order on him, that's all.
Thank you for applying. I don't know if you remember, we met at your house.
You came by my house. I did not forget.
Yes, exactly. So
I brought up development with you when you came by.
Yes, absolutely. So I guess the one thing that I'm curious about is obviously Rochester and Ulster County more generally. There's a huge influx of people that are moving up here. You know, the pandemic has allowed a lot of people to do that, but that's been a trend in this area for a while. And you know, there are different priorities that people might have if they're weekenders or full-time residents that were born and raised in the town. I'm curious what you think the role of the planning board is in kind of mediating those discussions, and what can the planning board do to kind of help you know, bridge any gaps or differences in terms of to use your phrase, I think, you know, what the goals of the community are and the
Right.
goals of the town.
Yeah, well, you know, I know a lot of locals. And when I say locals, I don't mean people who've been here for 5 or 10 years, though I do know a lot of those too. I mean people who are born and bred here, whose parents were here, whose grandparents were here, and so forth and so on. And I think I said this in I know I said this in my one speech at one of the town halls. I don't know why, but I happen to love. I mean, I know why, but I love the town. And the people in the town, and they matter an immense amount to me. And I think it's very important because I genuinely believe in rural gentrification and the effects of it. And I genuinely believe that people need to balance the needs of the town and the people who've been there for a long time with the desires and needs of people who've either come just on weekends. And I'm a registered Republican. I sit on, I was appointed by a Democrat. So I think I do span the political spectrum. And I would also say that a lot of the political spectrum depends on how long somebody's been in the town in the first place. Not always necessarily the case. But I think that I do a good job of talking to different people and where they might fall in their desires for the town, and hopefully come for compromise. I mean, I tried to do that for Skate Time 209. I've tried to do it for other things, even mediating issues between some of my long-term neighbors and people who showed up recently, you know, where they might call the sheriff because roosters are going on their property, you know, things like that, where I'll try and help. And, you know, I do think that I would be good at that. I do think that people see me as a reasonable person who's trying to come up with solutions that helps everybody. And I genuinely believe that there is a way to accommodate economic growth and what, you know, services that a weekend person might want, but also, or people who've been here for, like me, who've only been here for 8 years, and address also a lot of the fears, you know, very, very strong fears that a lot of people in the town have. And I think the planning board can do that as long as they follow their responsibilities and don't overstep.
Great, thank you.
Okay, Adam.
Yeah, again, Zach, thanks a lot for coming in. You know, my question for you is, what's your understanding of the Town of Rochester Board's Economic Enterprise Overlay Authority?
Adam, I don't know if you were trying to stump me by seeing how well read I am in that specific thing. I've only begun to familiarize myself because you know, I've seen what the Granary Project is, and I know that that's affected by the Granary Project.
Yeah.
I've also been talking to Ulster County about some other things that would be affected by that overlay. And then also generally one of my attorneys who represented me on something, our dear friend Mike Moriello, I know, you know, deals a lot with the economic overlay in different towns, but I can't tell you specifically for the town of Rochester.
No. That, and it wasn't a trap question. Believe me, it was more, you know, our town board and our planning board has a you know, a lot of projects coming up where they may have to work together on certain programs. So I just wanted to check and see if you had an opinion one way or the other. But thank you very much.
I am a quick study.
Okay, Charlotte, we'll go to you next.
Sure. My question is, how do you feel about how you'll respond to like the checks and balances of being on the board in a cooperative manner? Like, I know you're already on the board for the Ulster County projects, which is great. But as far as a working group, where with the economic overlay, you might have to work hand in hand with the board and the planning board.
Right. Well, I do have some relationship with different members of the town board, and by relationship, I mean I've spoken to them in either private or in public, and I think in a very reasonable and productive manner. I do have a prior working relationship with Mike and Supervisor Baden. Yeah. And I do know some members of the planning board already as well. And a lot of my job is dealing with a myriad of interests. You know, if you build a building in Soho, I guarantee you, as fraught as a Skate Time 209 meeting is in the town of Rochester, try dealing with a community board meeting in New York City. You know, that's very difficult. And it's, you know, there's so many people to deal with, from the city to parks departments, Department of Buildings, to, you know, the artists and residents, to your neighbors, to the worst neighbors, which are the ones who have the really, really expensive attorneys and everything in between, you know, and you can figure it out. And I do it with Ulster County and with the executive branch and the legislative branch. I think that's at least my experience. And again, I know I'm supposed to be championing myself, so I'll tell you straight out, I think that I do a good job of that.
Okay, and Aaron, we're getting a little tight on time here, but let you ask.
I apologize, I'm long-winded.
No, that's quite all right.
So everyone stole all my questions. So I'm going to do a follow-up because you sort of touched on one of my questions, which was you were explaining how you thought the planning board could bridge the gap between land use planning and the community. And at the end, you said, as long as the planning board does what it's supposed to do or stays in its lane, you said something like that. What does that mean? What did you mean when you said that?
Well, I mean, the planning board has a specific role. I mean, just the same way that I don't believe the judicial branch should legislate from the bench, I don't believe that the town board which is an appointed, or sorry, the planning board, which is an appointed and not an elected position, has limits to its authority. And furthermore, there's outlines to the responsibilities of members of any government branch, be it an appointed one or an elected one, and to try and you either inject your personal opinions and beliefs in a way that goes beyond the purview of your position, I think is wrong. So that's what I'm saying is, I'm not shy in saying, and I already admitted this, I genuinely believe in in rural gentrification, right? I also believe in commercial development, but just those beliefs aren't going to make me do anything out of the bounds or push an agenda in a way that is both controversial, but also, again, not what my role is, my role would be as a member of the planning board.
Okay, Zach. Just to fill you in, there's one position on the planning board that we're filling. It's a 7-year term. We will be deciding and making a resolution at our February 3rd meeting. So we will, we'll definitely be in contact with you one way or the other to let you know. But we thank you for your time, for your interest in the board, and we will speak soon.
Thank you. I appreciate everybody's time. And even if I do not get the position, I'm sure I'll be working with all of you very soon in other capacities. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have B. Haugen Depew, who is applying for the HPC. Good evening, B. How are you? You're still muted there.
I'm in
There
my
we go.
favorite spot in the house where I hope I stay online.
No, we've got you just fine.
Okay.
I don't really know. We're interviewing more out of formality than out of need. We have
All right,
several
well.
positions open on the HPC, excuse me. Thank you very much for joining us. We've always done this with our new applicants, and
That's okay.
wanted to be fair. So
It is. It's a good thing.
it's very nice to see you.
Nice to see the new
I
members.
do not have a set of
Charlotte.
questions for the HPC, so I'm gonna just start. We'll start with Charlotte and let Charlotte ask. Actually, B, why don't you tell us first about yourself and your background and
Oh
why
my
you want
God.
to be on the HPC?
Okay, because I'm old and it's voluntary and I've lived in town for 71 years and I've forgotten more than any of you on there will ever know about the buildings in this town. How's that?
That's a fine answer.
Well,
That is a fine
it's an
answer.
No, I do know a lot about and the other thing is I really want to keep the past alive for the people now and going into the future. I don't want to lose some of these buildings. Some of them very close by, I'm a little worried about. The Pine Grove has excavated around the one stone house below. I can give you history all night, but anyway, that one building belonged to Nellie Huber, who was Nellie Cedio, who was a great aunt or something. Anyway, we were land barons in Pawtucket at some point in time. Anyway.
Okay, Charlotte, let me turn it over to you if you have any questions for B.
Sure. I guess all right, I'm going to ask you a fun question since
Okay.
we don't really have any serious ones for you. What's your favorite
on.
historic fact for town?
For the town? Well, the fact that when I grew up as a kid, you could walk almost any direction and get milk. That's all. You could
Oh, I
carry
like
the
that.
little quart or the little half gallon or the gallon container or the quart container, and I could walk up to, I could go to Tesla's and get milk, or I could go to Elroy and Henry Smith's and get milk. If I were really ambitious, I could go up to Freer's and get milk. That's where Billy DeGraw lives now. Down the road, Rabbi Katz had a farm also, so I could just walk where, you could go in 20 directions and get milk. That's just an interesting. Just an
Okay.
interesting point in Pawtucket, that's all.
Michael,
Oh, you're able to catch me off guard every time. Hi, Dee. It's good to see you.
It's good to see you, Michael. What's up? Come on.
I'm curious. Obviously, preserving the history of the town. Part of that is making sure people care about the history of the town, and we have a lot of newcomers coming to town. Do you have any ideas about how the HPC could make the history of town interesting to these people, or do some outreach to newcomers so they realize the history and how important it is?
Kate's not here, but she's probably going to shoot me.
no, she's here. She's listening in.
There she is. Okay. I've only got so much room in the screen. I wondered if the HPC could put together a little packet of some of the most interesting houses after someone moves here. And that way they could go road to road. They'd not only get the ability to find the road, if they're very new, it could be like, you know, when you go out on one of those treasure hunt things and find the house, if you can match it to the picture or whatever they can produce, something like that. And just make it interesting for them to want to acquaint themselves with what's available and what they can see.
I think it's
Something
great.
like that. More paperwork on Kate's counter.
Aaron,
Hi, Dee, welcome back.
Hello.
So I think that's an excellent idea. I think my fun question for you would be, is there anything in particular you'd be really excited to work on the HPC?
I spoke a little bit with Kate today. I know a little bit about a lot of ancestry, and I want to tell you that the original people in the town, when I rode the school bus, looking back at that ancestry, I can tell you we are all related, and that would be the part that I would like to help with, to show how we're all connected, something like that through ancestry.
Oh, I love that.
that's exciting. Okay, Adam.
B, I honestly, I don't have any questions after working with you for more than 2 years. I've always been wildly impressed with your local knowledge, and I think if appointed, you'll be a wonderful addition to the HPC. Good luck.
Thanks, Adam. Thank you.
Yeah. B, we'll be doing our appointments at our February 3rd meeting. As I said, there's several openings on the HPC. They do have a meeting this coming Monday by Zoom.
Okay.
I will we'll make sure we get the invite sent out to you, even though you wouldn't be officially appointed.
I don't have Wilton's phone number, and if I weren't so lazy, I could walk and get it, but not in this weather, I'm afraid.
We
But
will
anyway.
we will make sure to get you the information, as we have I believe 4 openings on the board, and you are our only applicant at this point. So I do not see, but I'm thrilled that we have even that many people, because in past years we had 5 or 6 people on the HPC, and now we're up to 10, and you would be, I believe, number 11.
11's
You'll
a
either
good
be
number.
10 or you'll be 11, which is really exciting. And last year we added 5 or 6 new people. So
I know a little bit about public officers law. I know
Yeah.
that's one of your favorite questions. I know it.
Yes, it is. So thank you very much. We appreciate you joining us tonight. And
Have
have a good
fun,
evening.
people. Enjoy. It's a great learning thing.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, B.
Bye-bye.
Okay, next we have Anne Marie Maloney. Okay, good evening, Anne Marie. How are you?
Hi, how are you? I'm having a little wackiness with the video tonight. 'Cause
That's quite all right. Just you can feel free to leave the video turned off. We can hear you just fine, not a problem.
Yeah.
Oh, we lost her.
I have other shows I can do.
Oh, here we go. Here we go. Little soft shoe tap dance routine, maybe?
You don't want to see me dance, no.
There you are, Anne Marie. We have you back again.
Hi, I'm sorry. It's just the
That's quite all
connection's
right.
a little
Not a
wacky.
problem.
Okay.
We understand in this computer age, Zoom is not perfect. So thank you for joining us. For the board members, Anne Marie is applying to be reappointed. She's currently on the planning board. She started out as the alternate and then was appointed to fill a vacancy. What was that, 2 years ago?
Oh,
3
gee
years
whiz,
ago?
I think it was 3 years ago.
It probably was about 3, yeah. So we have a set of 5 questions we'd like to ask you. Why don't we start out with you letting you just tell us about your background and why you, well, not why you want to be on the planning board. You're on the planning board already, but tell us about your experiences, and then we'll ask you the 5 questions, and then I'll give each board member a follow-up chance.
All right, perfect. Thank you. My name is Anne Marie Maloney. I've been serving on the Town of Rochester Planning Board for the last few years. I take this position very seriously, and I am very proud to be serving in the community that I grew up in. I went to high school in, college in, and believe it or not, this is the only place on the planet I wanted to retire to. I built my own home in 2017, and I became inspired to join the board. And I was encouraged by the planning board members as well as town board members to submit an application. I was sworn in, I worked as an alternate. And since then I have gained, through training opportunities and meetings, extensive knowledge of how we as a planning board operate to serve everyone in our community, not just the developers. We serve our teachers, our state workers, our migrant workers, our home health care workers, and the heart of our community are farmers. My parents were both farmers in Ireland, and my dad successfully had an organic vegetable farm just for family use for over 40 years. Our community is broad and ever growing, so some folks arrive in the town of Rochester and they see the beauty, the reason they are drawn to the town of Rochester and the reason they want to stay. And as a board member, we are able to help shape the future landscape by working with the property owners, and we help them navigate our regulations. And I also believe that we also help to keep in the Salvic feel and the upstate aesthetics. And I believe the town board, planning board at this time is doing a fine job of it. I grew up in Accord, graduate of Rondout. Like I said before, I attended Ulster County Community College. And while working as a nanny to a local family, I found myself working for them in New York City, which propelled me to volunteer for my local community on the Upper West Side. And then eventually I worked for the city and proudly served the city for 22 years. While working in New York City, I was able to gain valuable knowledge on the ins and outs of event planning, including but not limited to concerts, events, both indoors and outdoors, and what it really takes to facilitate such a large task. After I retired from that job, I was the operations manager of a 30,000 square foot facility that saw events every weekend. I worked closely with city agencies, community boards, families living in the vicinity to ensure that the events did not create a hardship on the families living in the area. And I am also a trained fire guard for New York City. I'm a member of the Four Greenfields Corporation here in the town of Rochester for over 40 years. I sat on their board for 17 years consecutively. I am the vice president of marketing for the Upstate Women in Film and Television. I am on the board of the Ulster County Women's Network, and I also serve on the board of the Friends of Historic Rochester. I guess you could say I'm a 100% Ulster County girl. I am not a real estate developer, and I have absolutely no financial stake in any developments anywhere. I do have a reputation for being fair and impartial. As a gay woman and the only member of the LGBT community serving on the planning board, I bring a different perspective to the board. I also round out the diversity that is needed in our growing population. And I appreciate that people feel I'm an approachable and good listener and willing to help. And I would love to continue to be a productive planning board member. And I know I'm Irish, so I'm very long-winded. Sorry about that.
Okay. What's the role of the planning board in town government?
The role of the planning board is to help facilitate, evaluate, facilitate planning for property owners, both residential and business, and while keeping the aesthetics of this area together.
Okay, next question is, what does land use planning mean to you in your own words?
In my own words, land use, I know people would say management of the land, but it is management of the land to benefit the entire community, growth versus takeover. Preserving viable farmland is part of land management. Making sure that there is affordable housing for people, not just affordable housing if you're in the millions bracket, but affordable housing for people that can't afford anything more than $800 a month. I think that, you know, we oversee the different developments that are coming, and I think we try to make them fit into what the needs of the town are.
Okay, the next question, you've more than answered, but it's describe your experiences and what skills you'd bring to the planning board.
Oh, skills I bring to the planning board. My communication skills, I think, are pretty sharp. There is this gap and this fear that people who have lived here for generations, that they have of growth coming in, and I feel that I'm able to share with them you know, what exactly is happening, and to alleviate the fear of economic growth, and to show them that it doesn't mean it's the fall of Rochester. I mean, we do need things to improve, and we need to keep up with the times, while again keeping with how our town looks. I mean, the beauty of it, that's why people came here, you know.
Okay, the next, as a member, you've already accomplished this, but are you familiar with the oath of office and the public officers law of New York State?
Yes, sir, I have been sworn in more times than I can count.
And then finally, are you comfortable with following rules, even if they differ with your personal opinions?
Absolutely 100%, and I don't have any issue with that whatsoever.
Okay, let me open it up to board member questions. Adam, let's have you go first.
We're back to me first. All right.
Yeah,
Anne-Marie,
I've been mixing it up, Anne-Marie, so I keep
that's
them on their
okay.
toes.
That's okay.
there you go. When you get to the end, the questions get harder, right? So,
Oh boy, I hope not.
no, I listen. First, thank you very much as a former alternate on the planning board. I appreciate it, and your current service. I know how hard you guys are working, and how the you know, planning board's really developed over the last couple of years. So thank you very much, Mike. I have one question for you though. Is what's your opinion of the town of Rochester Board's Economic Enterprise Overlay Authority?
Well, I think what needs to happen is that what's my opinion of it? I think that it is the authority. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's something that's necessary. I'd like to see it grow maybe a little bit better, and include the needs of everyone, as opposed to it just seems like it's more about the businesses and not so much about the residential, but it is. There's a little bit of this, there's a little bit of that, but you know, I'd like just to see it change just a little bit.
In what way, if you don't mind me asking?
I think sometimes our economic growth is very important to the town of Rochester. Right now, we are this blank canvas. And I definitely don't want to see an overdevelopment happen here, but I would like to see it develop to the point where the socioeconomics are in line with the people that live here. I hope that makes sense.
It does. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Charlotte, we'll go with you next.
Hi, Anne-Marie. Thank you for your time on the planning board thus far. First of all, what would you say? What would you say is your the biggest responsibility that you've had to face being on the planning board? What's the most important responsibility, I guess, is a better way to phrase it?
Well, I think fairness. It's so nice to be on a board where everyone is 100%, my experience, they're 100% prepared. They're willing and able to stand up for the rules and the regulations. I think the biggest challenge that I've seen on the board is that, and with no offense to anyone, it just seems like every developer in the world wants to get on it. And it just makes me wonder, is there a reason behind it? Is it to help develop the town of Rochester, or is it something personal? And I think that's kind of hard because it seems that sometimes rules only apply to certain people. They don't apply to everyone. So being on the board, it's nice to be able to speak up and say, hey, listen, does anybody see what's going on over here? And then it's like, oh yeah, you know, so I think that's the biggest challenge, is just watching other people try to adhere to it and people coming on the board for ulterior motives.
Okay, Erin, we'll go to you next.
Hi, Anne Marie. Thanks.
Hi, Erin.
Thanks for your service and for being here tonight. A similar question to Charlotte, but what's an example of something that's been very interesting or a challenging application type that you've had to review over the past few years?
I think the Wayward Ranch was kind of like a tough cookie because it just seemed that we were up against a wall with them because they were literally jumping through hoops, doing everything they could to get the application in, but it kept seeming like we were going 2 steps backwards on it. And then finally, we were all in agreement that it was a positive project. The scary thing is that there were residents in the area, although it was a farm and was developed as a farm, horse farm, for years and years and years, they were opposed. And it's a little disconcerting when you see people bringing in these high-priced lawyers, and it's a little scary, but I think we handle it very well. So something like that, you know, old school versus new school, we still see a lot of that, but I'm hoping that the town of Rochester can develop into a beautiful place for everyone.
Okay, Michael?
So I have 2 questions, but I know we're time constrained, so you can pick which one to answer. First one is there anything that surprised you about being on the planning board that you weren't expecting that you want to talk about? Or I know that anybody who's on a planning board has opinions about local codes. Are there local codes that you would change or that you would want the board to consider changing? What do you think the priorities would be to improve code to make the lives of the planning board and future planning boards easier?
Well, first of all, I don't think being on the planning board is ever easy. I think people go in with a little pinch in their stomach every time they go in because there's conflict associated with it because some people don't want to adhere to the codes. But what I found, especially being an alternate and starting to go through the training, that the codes are there for a reason. The laws are there for a reason. However, codes will, maybe now, maybe in the future, certain codes probably will be, I don't have anything on the top of my mind right now, will have to be changed to ensure that the town of Rochester flourishes and becomes, you know, this beautiful community and stays the same community that it is.
Okay. Well, Anne Marie, thank you very much for your service. Thank you for your time tonight.
Here I am.
There you are.
Of
Great.
course, it comes on at the very last moment.
That's quite all right. No bearing on your interview in any way. So the board will be deciding at our February 3rd meeting as to the appointment. We definitely thank you for your time tonight. We thank you for applying for this full-term position, and we'll be in touch. So
Thank you so
very
much. I
Yep.
appreciate it. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Have a good night.
You too.
Okay, next we have Greta Baker, who's applying for the Zoning Board of Appeals. Hi, Greta, how are you?
I am well, thank you. How are you? Hi,
Good.
everybody.
Thank you for being with us tonight. Apologies, we kept you waiting for just a minute or two. We're a little behind schedule, but not too bad. So Greta's applying for the zoning board of appeals. Greta, for your knowledge, there are 4 people applying for, excuse me, there are 6 people applying. There are 2 seats to fill. One is a 5-year term. One is the continuation of a resignation. And I unfortunately don't remember the end date of that term. I'd like to start by having you just tell us why you want to apply to be a member of the ZBA. Then I've got a set of 5 questions that we're asking every applicant, and then I'm going to give each board member an opportunity for 1 follow-up question. So if you want to just start up why you're interested in being on the ZBA.
I am interested in being a member of the ZBA because I care about the town and I care about the quality of life for the people who live here. And while I philosophically understand the point of view that, you know, if it's my property, I should be able to do whatever I want with it. I know that really the only tools we have to make sure that everybody's needs are being considered in property owners' decisions for how they develop their property and what they do is the zoning code. Without it, it's really a free-for-all where, you know, anybody can do whatever they want and it doesn't matter how it affects everybody else. So, so I really am interested in using the tools that we have to make sure that everybody's interests are protected.
Okay. So our first question, what is the role of the zoning board of appeals in town government?
The role of the zoning board of appeals is to consider applications when people want a variance. They want to build something. They look at the code and, well, either to make sure that they're in compliance with the code, or if whatever their project is does not really fit the letter of the law, they can ask for a variance. And that is what the ZBA would do, is to consider what is legal within the limits of our code.
Okay. Our second question is, the ZBA determines when, why, and how the laws may be varied. What information do you consider important in forming that decision?
Obviously the code itself, and the reasoning behind the code. It is impossible, really, for legislators like the town board, for example, a legislative body, to write legislation that takes into consideration every single possible circumstance. And so you would look at the code and what the reasoning is behind the code, but then the needs of the property owner and the impacts on their neighbors and the environment.
Okay. Next is, describe your experiences and what skills you would bring to the ZBA.
Okay, well, I had a brief brush with the ZBA some years ago when I was elected, or I was chosen to be a member of the ZBA, and I did attend several meetings before resigning. I was at that time just completely overextended. I was working full time and also, you know, in graduate school. So, whew, wow, it was way too much. So I did start to learn about the, you know, workings of the ZBA and started to read the code at that time. Also, the skills that I bring, I'm a really good reader and writer, and I'm good at analysis. I read legal writing all day, every day at my job. So I can handle the complexity.
Okay. Next, and you will already be aware of this, but are you familiar with the oath of office and the public officers law of New York State?
I am indeed.
It's a little bit of a question that gives me the opportunity to let people know that you are required to take an oath of office as an appointee of the town board. You are a public officer of the town, and you must adhere to the public officers law of New York State, at least the parts that would apply to you in this position. So I ask that question always just to make sure that people are aware of what they're getting themselves into by applying for this.
I am more than willing to uphold the Constitution of the United States and the state of New York and all of the above.
And then finally, are you comfortable with following rules, even if they may differ with your personal opinions?
Yes.
Okay. Let me open it up now to board members. Erin, we'll start with you.
Hi, Greta. How are you?
Hi, Erin.
Greta and I actually served on the ZBA together for the brief stint that she talked about. I was the alternate then. So you sort of answered my question, but mine's just like a quick one. What do you think about variances?
Well, I think that they should be fairly rare and really only given after consideration of, all of the factors that I mentioned before. If you give variances all over the place, then the code becomes meaningless.
Okay, Michael?
Hi, Greta.
Hi, Mike.
I guess I'm curious. So we obviously have positions open on the planning board and on the ZBA. What makes you gravitate towards the ZBA as opposed to the planning board? What appeals to you about that role as opposed to the other position?
Just a little bit more familiarity with the work of the board, of the ZBA rather than the planning board. I mean, not that I'm good at learning new things and I'm sure I could learn it, but I have a bit of familiarity going in with this one.
Great.
Okay, Adam?
Hey, Greta, nice to see you tonight. Thanks for applying. We appreciate it. My question for you, though, is do you feel that you can execute the role of a ZBA member in a pandemic environment and gain enough evidence to effectively render decisions?
Yes, I do. I'm very comfortable working in the digital environment. I'm, the graduate school program that I mentioned before was an entirely online master's degree in communication. So I'm very familiar with digital communication tools and processes. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Charlotte?
I think everyone covered my questions, or Greta answered them earlier. But
Okay.
thank you for
Hi,
coming,
Charlotte.
Greta. Hi.
Yes. So Greta, to fill you in, there are, and I apologize if I already said this at the beginning. Some I've said it at the beginning and some I have said it at the end. So there are two positions, a 5-year term, and I believe the other is either a 1 or a 2-year term to completion that we're looking to fill. We'll be making our decision at our February 3rd board meeting. So we definitely thank you for your interest. We thank you for your time. There are 6 applicants for those 2 positions, and we're interviewing everybody this evening for those. So we'll be in touch after that time, or feel free to watch that meeting on the 3rd. So
Okay. Well, thank you all very much for your
thank you very
consideration.
much. We appreciate your interest.
Okay. Bye.
Well, we managed to get back ahead a little bit here. We're 3 minutes ahead of our next applicant. So
I'm going to stop asking because no
yeah.
takers, so you don't offer rescinded.
Any juggling skills, Michael, or anything like that?
I can juggle, and I was hired. I say hired. I think it was for no pay to juggle at a makeshift Renaissance fair once.
Oh, well, there you go.
But I don't have my kit with me. So
The Ulster County Community College used to do a Renaissance fair every May. Charlotte's nodding in knowledge of it. That I was built the scenery and participated back many years ago.
but
Don't think I'd be here without those Renaissance fairs. I think that's where my parents met, at the Ulster Theater Department during Taming of the Shrew.
I'm embarrassed to say, maybe Charlotte, I've known your father since before you were born.
Probably.
He and I performed on stage together back in the days when Jack Lawson made us do everything. So I don't know if that ages me or what, but
Might age my father, I think, more.
and it was a lot of fun. You never knew quite what your father was going to do on stage. He kept it interesting.
Well,
You should have seen him during the haunted hayride days.
I can
Oh, yeah.
imagine. I can imagine. Oh,
It was a
here we go.
production.
Our next next applicant here. Good evening, Ken. Oh, you are muted.
How are we?
There you go. Perfect. Ken Stevens is applying for the Zoning Board of Appeals. So Ken, what we're going to do is we'll ask you to tell us a little bit about yourself, why you're interested in joining. We'll have a set of 5 questions that we've asked every person. Then I'm going to give each board member a follow-up question. To fill you in with a little background information, there are 6 people applying. There are 2 seats to fill. We have a 5-year term, and the other one is a filling out of a vacancy that I believe is either a 1-year or 2-year until the vacancy ends. And we will be making our decision at our February 3rd board meeting. But start with thank you for applying. Thank you for being with us tonight. And so if you can tell us why you'd like to be on the ZBA.
Very good. So I'm a longtime resident of the area. My wife and I moved here in 1986 from Gardner, and I have been previously involved in a variety of community activities until about 1998, when I began to have to telecommute, or commute rather, into New York City. And that kind of curbed the amount of time I had to devote to the types of activities I ordinarily would have been involved in. So having retired from my job at the Legal Aid Society about 2 years ago, I started looking for opportunities to begin to continue my interest in working in the community. And with the pandemic year, kind of put things in a little bit of a strange position for that. But right now, I'm interested in the Zoning Board of Appeals for 2 reasons. One is, I think that as an attorney, there's a certain a way of approaching issues and to some extent people that I think my background would provide some really good assets for the Zoning Board of Appeals. I like the idea of being able to look at problems from multiple sides. I tend to think I have a kind of a judicial character insofar as I've learned as a lawyer to respect my opponent's views. And I think that it's something that behooves somebody in this position to come in with an open mind about what somebody might be seeking, what the applicable rules are, and being quite clear about not wanting to be accused of being exhibiting any form of favoritism. or even, a suggestion of that. And I was reading something recently about the Zoning Board of Appeals in general, and somebody described it as a very delicate balance that is sometimes called upon. So that's pretty much it. So it's a combination of my personal background and the work of the Zoning Board of Appeals, as I understand it. And I don't pretend to be an expert.
Well, that's a perfect segue into the first question, which is what is the role of the Zoning Board of Appeals in the town government?
Well, I think the principal role would be to review the applications from people who are seeking variances. Somebody has obviously either proposed something that is not consistent or perhaps appears inconsistent with the existing zoning rules in the town, or there's a recognition that something has already happened that in fact doesn't comport with the zoning rules in the town. And so it's up to the Zoning Board of Appeals to hear applications and make informed decisions on those.
Okay, our next question is the ZBA determines when, why, and how the laws may be varied. What information do you consider important in forming that decision?
One thing is very important is precedent. In other words, each application will stand on its own footing. No two scenarios are exactly the same, but there's a principle in the law, they call it stare decisis, and it's designed to kind of help inform both the conformity of rulemaking and also to limit the extent to which governmental bodies can veer off course, if you will, into making rulings that can be challenged as arbitrary and capricious. So one aspect is you need to understand what's been done before. It doesn't mean that everything has to be followed exactly, but that's something that you want to bear in mind. The second thing is exactly, are there any specific unusual or unique circumstances here? What is the history of the application? Is it a case in which there is perhaps something that an individual would not have reasonably foreseen? Is it a situation in which there are hardships that have been incurred or would be incurred? And or what is the impact on surrounding properties in the community and the purposes for which particular zoning rules are on the books in the first place? Those are some of the things I think that would go into it.
Okay. Next is describe your experiences and skills that you would bring to the ZBA.
Well, one is analytical skills in being a lawyer, being able to understand rules and having a sense of where the rules provide for discretion and where they don't, and what the boundaries there are of. The second is people skills. I've been to many more meetings than most people who live in the town of Rochester, I suspect. And I know that most of you have too. And over the years, I've developed, I think, a pretty good way of working with people. Most lawyers spend a lot of their time speaking with their opponents, speaking with their colleagues, and the good lawyers, I think, learn to listen more than talk. And I think that's a skill that I have developed over the years. I'm a pretty level-headed guy. I don't tend to get, I'm passionate about some things, but in my professional life, I think it's been helpful to be relatively even-keeled, to learn to be civil, even when you're having serious disagreements. And I think those skills would also serve me well.
Okay. Are you familiar with the oath of office and the public officers law of New York State?
I've been employed as a state employee, and the oath of office is not anything that would, be a big surprise to me. Let's say.
Okay.
I tell you, I'm sitting here, I can remember what it is, but.
And you just hit on the key of why I ask it. I asked that question more as a follow-up for me to explain to people that as a town appointed official, you are an officer of the town, and you must abide by the public officers law, and you must take an oath of office. So it's more a follow-up to let people know that that's part of the role and responsibilities. Then finally, are you comfortable with following rules, even if they may differ from your personal opinion?
Absolutely. I mean, nobody likes that. But I do have a lot of respect for the notion that it's up to elected bodies to make the rules and in the beginning, and those rules may differ with what we personally believe. But when you take that oath of office and you agree to a position like this, you have to subjugate, to some extent, your own wishes, how the law should be, and deal with it as it is. And that's something that we learn as lawyers, and I think as public officials who serve in positions similar to those that you people fill.
Okay, let me open it up to the board members. I've totally lost track of the order. I've been trying to mix it up so we don't stay in a rut. We'll start with Michael.
Thank you. Hey, Ken, appreciate you coming here tonight and having an interest in this position. I'm curious, you've been in town for a while. What's your favorite thing about Rochester?
So, particularly since I've retired, I'm an avid biker, and I just love being able both to take advantage of the nearby facilities at Minnewaska and at Mohonk, the preserve. But I also like riding around the roads here carefully because we have some outstanding views. And my second biggest thing that I like about it is the ability to hike too, similarly. And I enjoy living in this area. I don't know if I can put my finger on it exactly, but there's, if you permit me, a vibe in the town of Rochester that I like. I'm from New York originally. I've lived in Ulster County for 50 years. I had the chance to kind of both be in New York City for the work week, and I enjoyed the energy there, the diversity, but I also enjoyed coming home, and that's why I did what I did. So those are a couple of the things.
Great, thank you.
Aaron?
Hi, Ken. Thanks so much for applying. So one of the roles of the zoning board when looking at a variance application is to define the variance. So that's one of the jobs that you have to do. And sometimes that means you have to talk about what the front yard is or fence height for maybe an hour or more at a time in a board meeting. Does that sound interesting to you?
That's a really good question because, people like us, and I'm speaking, I don't want to speak for everybody, but, we have concerns that are very global, right? We're concerned about the environment. We're concerned about perhaps global warming. We're concerned about maybe poverty, maybe racism. But then we live in these local communities where on the ground level, the problems are smaller. They can seem less significant, but they're still very important to the people involved, and they're very important to the community. So look, I'm not going to tell you that I've never been in a meeting in which I thought we were dealing with minutia of very little significance in the grand scheme of things, if you will. But it's a process. And, when you have positions like these in a local town government, I think that's the big message, is that at our best, we're giving people an opportunity to feel like they've been fairly heard. It won't always be that way. I'm not naive, but that's what we would strive for, I would hope. And so, yeah, look, it can be an issue. I'm sure that many people burn out at times, thinking, there are other things that we could be doing with our lives than, like you said, maybe spending an hour on a neighbor's fence. But, this is a decision. I didn't make this decision lightly to put in an application here. I've actually considered, either volunteering at different nonprofits or engaging in part-time law practice. But when this opportunity presented itself, I thought, well, this is a good use of my skills with a kind of acceptable level of demand on my time. So I hope that it's close to answering your question.
Okay, Charlotte?
Well, I know Adam's next question is going to answer my question, so I'll let him have it. But I just want to say thank you for applying, Ken. And also in your statement that you sent us for applying, I just want to say thank you for all of your social service work that you have done over the years throughout your career. Reading through it, it was quite impressive to me. I run a nonprofit, so knowing the similar work that we've been through, I very much so appreciate it.
Thank you very much. And let me take a minute and just say I appreciate everything that you guys do, because I know that being on a town board is not, risks, rewards. Hats off to you, especially during this pandemic years. So, okay.
Okay, Adam, we'll let you get your question in.
There you go. Thank you very much. It's been the same question for everybody. So my question for you is do you feel that you can execute the role of a ZBA member in a pandemic environment and gain enough evidence to effectively render a decision?
Yes, but I do think it does present different challenges. I was remarking to someone the other day that it was literally my first Zoom meeting of the pandemic. It was in some ways a great time to retire, because I would have done, hundreds, if not thousands of Zoom meetings if I had stayed at legal aid throughout this time. But I'm pretty technologically savvy in general, and I'm used to telecommuting. I was doing that for 20 years, granted just one day a week while I was working in New York City. So I think it's an additional challenge. I'm hoping that we're not at the beginning of the pandemic, but at least more than halfway through. But hey, 5 years commitment is, I'm hoping that we get back in person sometime soon. But I'm thinking that Bruce, who I spoke with very briefly this week as a chair, seems to be quite comfortable with being able to access and share documents. And there is a little bit of issue, perhaps. I guess most of the documents that we would be dealing with are in the public domain. One thing we had to be concerned about, I know in my previous job, was maintaining, the integrity of documents. If you're using a personal computer, having adequate safeguards there. So that would be something. I don't know if I'm sure it must have come up already.
No, thank you very much. And as somebody who's on my 9th and soon to be 10th WebEx of the day, Zoom meeting of the day, I can appreciate that. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Anything else that I can address, Mike?
No, we are all set. So thank you very much. As I said, I think I said earlier, and I apologize if I'm repeating, we'll be deciding on February 3rd. There are two seats to fill on the ZBA. You are one of 6 people who have applied for those 2 seats. And we thank you for your interest and for your time tonight.
Hey, let me just say one last thing. I think it's marvelous that you have 6 applicants.
I'm thrilled.
That is marvelous.
This is a recent thing, the last couple of years, that we had so many people to choose from, and it's exciting that so many people want to be involved. So while it makes it hard on us, I'm excited that we have this choice. So
and let me just say one other thing. I think I indicated that I know that there was one person who served as an alternate previously, and if the process is such that you serve time on the bench before joining, that doesn't. But I'm not ego invested in this. Let me just put it to you that way. I'm not very ego invested in this. And if you have better candidates, by all means, go for it. I mean, really.
Oh, well, if we didn't select you, we may hit you up for other boards and commissions that we have volunteer seats on. So
very good.
Brian Drapkin, our former board member, was always, reminding people that there are other boards other than the planning board and the ZBA, and sometimes those seats are hard to fill. So, but thank you again for your time, and we'll be in touch early February.
Very good. Take care.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Welcome, Isabel. How are you? Still connecting here to audio. And you need to unmute and we'll be all set. There we go. Perfect. Isabel is our current alternate on the Zoning Board of Appeals. She's applying for the full term position. So Isabel, we're gonna let you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background. Then we have 5 standard questions that we're asking all people who are applying. And then I'm going to give each board member a follow-up question. To fill you in, we have 2 seats to fill. One is we had a resignation recently, and the other is the full 5-year term. We'll be making our decision at our town board meeting on February 3rd.
Okay.
So just wanted to let you know on that. So,
Thank you.
so in the meantime, why don't you tell us about your experiences as the alternate and why you want to be on the Zoning Board of Appeals, and then I'll ask you the 5 questions.
Sure. Well, hello, everybody. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Isabel Vinton, and I moved to the area about 6 years ago now. My husband, Jesse, and I run Tributary Farm, which is a local farm in the area, and I work for the Hudson Valley Seed Company. And when I first joined, I got involved in some volunteer efforts and originally started with CASA, which is the court-appointed special advocates in Kingston, and did some volunteer work over there. But more recently, I've become much more interested in getting involved in local town affairs, and I've been looking for ways to get more involved. And that led to me applying to be the alternate member on the ZBA in April last year, which I found really, really interesting. There have been one in particular, but some really interesting applications. I've learned a lot more than I did know at the beginning about what the ZBA does and what its responsibilities are and how it serves the town. It's been a really good experience. And now that the vacancies have come up, it was a good opportunity to apply to get involved in a little bit more serious way, I guess.
Okay. So the the first question is, what is the role of the Zoning Board of Appeals in town government?
I know this a little bit better than I did the last time you asked me this.
Yeah, you're going to find it's the same 5 questions.
So basically, the ZBA is responsible for making decisions about when to grant exceptions to the zoning code that are brought up by the code enforcement officer. And so, these typically take the form of area variances. Occasionally, they can take the form of use variances. I haven't seen any of those. And as I said, since I've been a member of the alternate, I've seen a few different types of applications. So I've seen an area variance, I've seen an application related to changing the property line, and also to establishing a 4-foot fence. So I think what I found interesting is knowing that while we have a general zoning code, the ZBA kind of takes into account that there are very real cases where exceptions can and should be granted for the benefit of both the applicant and also the community. And so it's been interesting to see how the ZBA kind of wrangles and makes those decisions and kind of balances the different interest groups, I guess, and trying to get the equation right.
Okay, the next question is, the ZBA determines when, why, and how the laws may be varied. What information do you consider important in forming that decision?
Well, you want a lot of information that pertains. So for example, in some of the recent applications, the site plan, how it will affect different aspects as outlined in our comprehensive the town's comprehensive plan. So a big one in recent decisions has been, how it might affect the environment, and different factors related to wildlife and vegetation on the property and things like that. You want to know, so with the site plan, you obviously need how it's going to change, how the variance is, like what the variance is related to the zoning code as well. So, if there's a specific setback, you want to know, how big that variance is. And I think it's helpful to know, well, it's also helpful to know what other, options there are available to the applicant in terms of, do they really have to go down this route? What could they do apart from being granted this variance? For example, with the fence, there might be an option to plant trees instead of having a fence. That would be an example of different options. And there was one other thing I wanted to say as well. Sorry, it slipped my mind, but those are some of the things that I'd want to know.
Okay. Next question is, describe your experiences and what skills you would bring to the ZBA.
So I'm currently the strategy and a data analyst at the Hudson Valley Seed Company. So I'm used to looking at data. I studied history at college, so also related to that, I'm used to looking through large pieces of information and kind of picking out the salient facts, which is one thing that I've realized with the ZBA. There are a lot of documents to look through, and you're kind of piecing together what's relevant, what's important, and how that will apply to your decision. So I think that's one thing. I'm also used to dealing with different stakeholder and interest groups. And obviously in the ZBA, you're dealing with the applicant, with different board members who may have different opinions, with people in the community. So I think being able to listen and balance those interests is important as well. And I also, as the wife of a farmer and working in a local business, I increasingly understand a little bit more about local town affairs, and I'm trying to really involve myself in what's going on in the town, what's important, and what people care about.
Okay, next question. Are you familiar with the oath of office and the public officers law of New York State?
Yes, I am.
You probably remember that from the last time you took.
Yes, I was very worried that I would have to memorize it. So
you do not have to memorize it. And then finally, are you comfortable with following rules, even if they differ from your personal opinions?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Adam, let's let you go first with the questions.
Okay. First off, thank you very much for being our alternate. I know, tough to show up every meeting well prepared and probably not get a chance to voice your opinion. So really do appreciate that hard work as a former alternate myself. My question for you is do you feel that you can execute the role of a ZBA member in a pandemic environment and gain enough evidence to effectively render a decision?
Yes, I do. And can I ask a follow-up? Just what specifically are you worried about in terms of like a pandemic specific situation?
A handful of things, and you're the first one to ask me that, so I appreciate it. One is, we've had not only with the town and the business that I work with, folks that don't feel that they can properly execute their job because they're hampered by either technology, communications, other things. I think one of the advantages that you have is you get a chance. You've already gotten a chance for a full year to see how the board interacts with the digital platform when they have the opportunity to go face to face. How they go about gathering evidence. So my real question is how are you embracing that? And if you are, what's working well for you, but what maybe would you do different or better?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I haven't had an issue with moving between, we've had some remote meetings, some in person. Obviously I'm used to using Zoom and different platforms, so that hasn't been an issue. Nicole and has done a really amazing job of making sure that all of the agendas and minutes and all of the documents are made available. I'm used to using Google Drive, so that hasn't been an issue either. I think just keeping track of, is it going to be in person or is it going to be remote? And there is something nice about being in person. You know, you get a better sense of the room and, you know, some things that it's easy to miss remote. So I always enjoy the opportunity to go in person. But you have to do what you have to do. So I think just like really making sure to have time with the documents before the meeting is important. But yeah, I don't have any specific concerns, I guess, with that.
Of course. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, Michael?
Isabel, thank you for your time so far, and thank you for taking the time tonight to talk with us. I'm curious, what's your favorite thing about the town of Rochester, and what do you want to see for Rochester in the next 5 to 10 years?
That's such an interesting question. I think my favorite thing is that, you know, we have a lot of different types of people living in our town. And I'm sure, you know, almost every town in the country could say that. But, you know, we're seeing a lot of changes very quickly. But when you speak to whoever you speak to that's living in our town, they really, really love the area, think it's stunningly beautiful, and are really committed to protecting it. And maybe their thoughts on how to protect it and further it might be different, but everyone has that same interest and goal, I guess. So I guess it's feeling that I'm in a community of very passionate people who love their beautiful area, and it feels very invigorating, I guess. And, you know, having grown up in a rural area in the UK, I can tell you that that is definitely not the case of a lot of rural towns, to feel that kind of passion and dynamism. So that's one of the things I love best about it. And sorry, I forget the second part of your question.
No, I think that was answered. That was the
Okay.
gist. I also was curious what you would want to see in the next 5 to 10 years for the town, but I think you've answered it. I don't want to occupy too much.
Okay.
Okay, Charlotte?
I think you've answered all my questions, Isabella. Thank you for applying and for the service that you've provided so far. So I'll pass it on.
Thanks, Charlotte.
Hey, Aaron?
Hi, Isabel.
Hi, Erin.
So you made it through your first year as the alternate. What about that experience made you want to join the board as a full member?
I think it's partly the challenge. You know, going to the meetings, there were some meetings where honestly, a lot of it was a little bit above my head, in the sense that there's some very complicated technical language. I was having to do a lot of research to understand, you know, what the different zoning code applications were, why something wasn't allowed in the first place, what kind of precedents or other cases had come beforehand. So it's kind of, there's a kind of challenge there, and something that I'm really interested to keep learning about, and to feel that this is a really valuable position. You know, when I look at the when I look at the applications and the questions that are being put to it, these are really valid, interesting decisions that need to be made, that rely on volunteers or, you know, community members to be on the board. And so, you know, I want to be kind of making myself useful and learning more about the town and, you know, our different zoning code. I think that the zoning code has application to a bunch of other kind of more broader kind of aspects of town life as well. So I'm kind of interested to putting some of the very specific things that I'm learning about the application into kind of a bigger picture as well. And then I guess thirdly, you know, as you may or not know, I recently welcomed our second child into the world. And so last year, honestly, was a bit of an anomaly for me. I was pregnant, heavily pregnant for the last half, and then gave birth in November, December. And I just feel like I'm getting back to normal, and excited to kind of give it my all this time and really get involved wholeheartedly.
Okay, well, we thank you very much for your time tonight. thank you for your service on the ZBA so far. And we'll be making our decision at our February 3rd meeting as to where we'll be going. We did have 6 applicants for the position for the 2 seats. Actually, there are 2 positions available. So
Okay, great.
thank you for joining us tonight, and we'll definitely be in touch soon.
All right. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. Have a good
Yep.
night.
Thank you.
Bye.
You are still muted.
Good evening.
Good evening. Stephen, is it Cidrain?
Cidrain, that's correct.
Cidrain, okay. From your cover letter, I couldn't tell, are you applying specifically for the planning board, the zoning board of appeals, or, and the answer can be both, if that's the case.
When I spoke to Rick, he said there could possible positions.
Okay.
I wasn't narrowing it down in any way. I just
Okay. I just wanted to clarify, there's a little bit of a different set of questions that we would ask, but we can
Okay.
certainly interview for both positions. We have 1 position available on the planning board. We have 2 positions available on the zoning board of appeals. I wasn't totally clear because your letter said planning and zoning. So I just wanted to clarify if there was one in particular.
Fair enough.
So what we'd like to do is have you tell us a little bit about yourself, why you're interested in applying. Then I've got a set of questions that we'll ask regarding the position. They're generic questions we've asked all the applicants. And then I'll give each board member an opportunity for a follow-up question with you, and we'll go from there.
Sure, thank you. I appreciate you taking the time to interview me. I've been a practicing attorney for many decades, and I've basically sold my practice. My wife and I had a practice in Nassau County, and we have sold it to our junior partners, who we basically groomed for this purpose in an attempt to sell a small professional practice. We have 6 attorneys. We do real estate related stuff, landlord tenant law, mostly representing landlords. We're deeply enmeshed in the process of housing in most of the practices in New York City. It's in Brooklyn, the Bronx, Queens, and Manhattan. Occasionally we get cases in Nassau County. We also do work with the boards, the various boards in the city, such as the Department of Housing Preservation and Development, the discrimination, New York State Department that deals with discrimination, the city department that deals with discrimination. And there's a process in the city based on anti-harassment statutes that were passed by the state and the city that requires a qualification before you can get a building permit, so we guide our clients through that process. I went to school for planning, environmental planning, and then Masters of Regional Planning. So I'm pretty familiar with that process, both processes. The practice, our law practice, involved a lot of dealing with the Department of Buildings, some violations and corrections, and advising clients on how to get where they needed to go in terms of removing violations, repair of buildings. I was raised by an engineer. My father was an engineer, so I got a lot of background in that. Before I became an attorney, which was my second career, my first career I ran a printing company in Nassau County, a label shop, web presses, pharmaceutical packaging, primary food labeling, that my parents had started. My brother and I joined when we graduated college. Then at some point I said, I want to do something else. So I went back to law school. My wife had already become an attorney, and we started a firm together in 2004. And we have just now moved on. I have a lot of spare time, despite my all my hobbies, which include gardening, biking, cross-country skiing. I'm an outdoorsman. I think of myself as an outdoorsman. And so I wanted to give something back to the community. I've lived in the area for 25 years, basically. First, we had a small place over on Clove Valley Road, and then we moved up into Kerhonkson and Laurel Hollow. And now more time is freed up, and I thought it would be, I could get engaged and I could actually make a meaningful contribution to the town. And that's in a nutshell.
Okay. Let me start out with the planning board questions first. There are some similarities between the two. So what's the role of the planning board in the town government, in your opinion?
The role of the planning board is to make sure that the applicant's applications meet the code requirements, which presumably were drafted to benefit the town. It's and to weigh in with and evaluate the applications and their impacts on the town and on the neighbors and on the neighborhood. That's how I see it, pretty much.
Okay. Second question, what does land use planning mean to you, that term?
Land use planning? It means the uses to which land are put. There's a lot of potential different applications for land use, some of which is not to be used at all, no development, some of which is intensive development. And there's a whole gradient of uses in between that. And planning in a community like Rochester, I would think that some of the focus would be on getting compatible uses together. I mean, my view of planning is that you have a commercial corridor, which in this case would be 209, 4455, and a few other major roads in the town. And the preservation of the character of the town by the judicious application of how property is used.
Okay. Our next question, describe your experiences and the skills you'd bring to the planning board. I think you've already covered a lot of it, but if you want to just expand on it a little bit.
I'm a pretty analytical person. I like to break down problems. This comes from my training both in planning school and in running a small business in New York State, which was quite a challenge, and in running a law practice. You have all the different aspects of decision making, and from the business side of it, from the legal side. Did that answer the question?
It did. It did.
Okay.
The next, and I think as an attorney, you will be very aware, but are you familiar with the oath of office and the public officers law of New York State?
Not in depth, but I am certainly aware of the ethical requirements required of attorneys, which is probably stricter, I would guess.
I would guess as well. It's a question that I ask more to sort of give me the opportunity to just enlighten people that in applying for this, even though it's a volunteer position, you are designated as a public officer. You are bound by the public officers law. You must take an oath of office, and it is very fairly straightforward thing, but it gives me the opportunity to just let people know that in this position, you must be sworn in and you must abide by the public officers law in terms of ethics, in terms of confidentiality, things like that. So very similar, I'm sure, to the attorneys.
Sure.
Finally,
similar.
are you comfortable with following rules, even if they may differ from your personal opinions?
Happens every day. I'm married. More seriously, yeah. Representing landlords in New York is a challenge because there are a lot of laws that I may not agree with, but those are the laws and they have to be followed. Lots of them I agree with. I'm not saying that I'm not expressing an opinion about the correctness of the, particularly in the city. It's pretty tricky. But
Okay.
I have no problem following the law.
Okay. Let me ask you then, there are two questions that are a little bit different for the Zoning Board of Appeals. So the first is, what's the role of the Zoning Board of Appeals in the town government?
My understanding is that the Zoning Board of Appeals is, as the name implies, an appellate process where the applicants have an opportunity to get their applications reviewed again, have an opportunity to submit additional information, have an opportunity to perhaps modify their plan or take feedback from the board to modify their plan so that they may get approval. It happens after an application has been denied.
Actually, it's somewhat that, but what it is when the law has to be varied for a specific circumstance. So that to follow, the second question is, the ZBA determines when, why, and how the laws may be varied. What information would you consider informing that decision?
The impact on the neighbors, the degree of variance that's required. There's obviously the compliance with the SECRA and the other processes. I was looking just before the interview at some of the ZBA notes that are posted on the town website. And I could see basically that it's another review process.
Right.
I'd like to just add in, my first job out of law school, I worked for the Appellate Division, Second Department as an appeals attorney. That's where I was trained in the appellate court. That's my very first job. I worked in that position for 5 years.
Okay, Erin, let's let you go first with questions.
Hi, thank you for applying. So since you're sort of applying to both, I'm having trouble honing in on my question, but I think what I'm most curious about is in terms of how you view the roles of these boards, maybe generally, in the bigger picture with the town and land use planning and the zoning code as a whole.
The role of the board in the town and from the larger perspective?
Or the importance maybe that it can play in that way.
Okay. I think it's very important because the people who in front of whom that appear in front of the board are very interested in the outcome. It's not a casual situation. They're applying typically, I would assume, about their business or their home and the construction and erection of accessory dwellings and primary dwellings. And I think it has a tremendous impact on the town, how it functions, how, I mean, it's a broad question. I mean, comes to mind, it has impacts on the traffic patterns. It has impacts on the density of development. It has impacts on the general appearance. I mean, it's a lot of different perspectives on how the planning board and the zoning board of appeals affect the town. I mean, I think it's a tremendously important role.
Okay, Michael?
Hi, Stephen. It's good to see you again. I
Hi.
confess that you do have a skill at gardening, and I'm jealous of some of your gardens. So, well done there. I know we asked the question, or Mike asked the question about setting aside your personal opinions, but I'm curious what your personal opinions or personal preferences might be about the future of Rochester. What types of things do you think the town needs to be focused on, be aware of? What kinds of development do you want to see in town? What are your priorities?
Well, I'm here because I love the rural character of the town. Not entirely rural, but it's got, it seems to me that the town has been pretty successful in keeping commercial development to the commercial corridors, and at the same time providing a space and a place for agriculture. And I think the balance is very important between the uses of the property that's made. Personally, I'm not, I wouldn't say that I was pro-development for the town. Not that I'm against development, but it just unbridled development I don't think would benefit the town. And I think there are issues about when and where these changes occur that need to be carefully considered. I have a long interest in training in environmental issues. You know, I chose to study that in school. I did internships at the DEC and at the EPA in law school, and I have a long-held interest in the environment. You know, and so it's a broad question, but I think there needs to be a balance.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, Charlotte?
I think you've answered any questions I had. Thank you so much for applying.
Thank you.
Okay, Adam?
And again, thank you very much for taking time with us tonight. Well, one question is, what's your understanding of the Town of Rochester Board's Economic Enterprise Overlay Authority?
Economic Overlay Authority, it's a new term for me. So I'm not sure if you're asking me about the authority granted to the board under state law, or its legitimacy as viewed from. I'm not quite sure. So I'm not that familiar with the statute, so I'm not sure I can answer that correctly.
And that's okay. It's not meant to be an inspection question. It was more of if you had an opinion. There's several projects, or at least one project in front of the planning board that may need the board's economic overlay authority. Again, I didn't know if you had a strong opinion on it one way or another. But again,
we have a statute that allows for it's a partnership review from the town board and the planning board perspective, where the town board reviews. It's for properties that are in either underutilized or disrepair, which is it gives the opportunity to view it from a broader perspective just than a standalone statute in front of the planning board, where the town board gets involved in the review of the overall concept. And then the planning board reviews it from a site plan perspective, where they review, the things like the parking, the signage, the lighting. But the town board, it's a collaborative effort between the two. We installed this back in 2019 in our code, and have one application that's gone through it successfully, and have two others that are kind of, one is in process and one is kind of waiting in the wings. And it's a little misunderstood by some people because the town board gets involved in land use, but as you understand, the town board makes the legislation. So in this case, the town board gets to view the specific project and the benefits to the community in return for possibly either lessening some of the code or dealing with a relaxing of it if necessary. So
if I may make sure I understand Councilman's question, what is my view of the overlay authority, in my opinion of the overall process insofar as power sharing? And
I think that's the big question is, and it's come up, several times from both sides is, some people feel strongly that the board shouldn't have this power, or a collaborative effort. Others feel that they should. I just want to know if you had a strong opinion on it one way or the other.
I don't have a strong opinion one way or another. I'm really not familiar enough with the workings of the process to really, it's an interesting question. Never thought about it, quite frankly.
Like I said, not intended to put anybody on the spot or a trap. It was, like I said,
I get it.
I really do appreciate you trying to effort.
Yeah, I don't really have an opinion on it because I'm just not familiar enough.
Okay.
Thank you.
If I can ask you one question, would you have a preference of one board or the other in terms of your interests? Is one, more gee, I would rather prefer to be on the planning board or the ZBA, or if you don't have an opinion either way, that's fine too.
I just thought I could contribute, and I think I could function in either capacity pretty well. I'm a quick study. So
yeah, and it appears you have background in both, so yeah. So thank you very much for your time tonight. We appreciate you coming on at this late hour. We had I think 10 interviews that we've been doing since 6:30. So we thank you for your interest. We will be making our selections at our February 3rd town board meeting. There is one seat available on the planning board for a 7-year term. There are 2 seats available on the zoning board of appeals. One is a 5-year term, and the other is filling a vacancy that unfortunately I didn't look. It's either a 1 or a 2-year vacancy remaining. I don't remember which, but either way, we'll be making our decisions at our February 3rd meeting. So we thank you for your interest, for your time. And
thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. Leave it at that.
Okay. Well, have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Thanks, Stephen.
Do you guys need a quick 2-minute break before we move into the regular meeting? Would that be a good idea? And then so it's 9:10, so we'll just reconvene here in about 2 or 3 minutes. Okay, everybody is back. Thank you very much. Thank you to the board for all your hard work there. When we started last week, when I first made the agenda, we had 5 interviews, and by 2 days later, we were up to 10. The letters and emails just kept pouring in, which is a good problem to have. Had I known that, I would have scheduled it as a special meeting, but there just wasn't the ability to do that. So we will try to move through this other parts of the agenda somewhat quickly here tonight. The first is, with the pandemic, we need to audit the bills. We do need to adopt a resolution authorizing payment of the bills. So we will have to meet by Zoom next Thursday at 6 o'clock. What I'd like to propose is, if everybody is comfortable, is that I will have the bills available at some point on Wednesday. When they're available, I'll let everybody know. You guys can either come in individually and sign them. I can drop them by your house. You can sign them and I can pick them up, whatever may be easier. We've done both. For the new board members, we have to have 3 signatures on every voucher in order to pay the bills. Obviously mine is 1, so I need a minimum of 2 more signatures on every voucher. Normally we meet in person and we pass them around, and if there's questions, we have group discussion. Doesn't lend itself to doing it by Zoom. As a matter of fact, it'd be pretty impossible to do it by Zoom unless I put each voucher up on the screen, and we'd be there all night long doing that. So is the board comfortable with that? That each of you can come in before 6 o'clock on Thursday? I'll let you know as soon as they're available. And then we can convene that meeting at 6 just to do the sole resolution authorizing payment. Does that sound, at least for the short term?
Yeah, that's what we did last time, right? And then whether it was.
Well, we didn't do the resolution in past. I did learn, you go to these trainings and you learn something, and I learned from the controller's office. I always was taught that the signing of the bill was enough to authorize it, but according to the comptroller, there should always be an authorizing resolution. So we've been doing that now since the end of last year. So in order for us to do that resolution, we have to meet. So, but it should be
okay.
A 5-minute resolution process at 6 o'clock on Thursday night. And that would be because that's the audit meeting, that would be the only item on the agenda would be the authorizing payment of the bills. And each of you would have had the opportunity to review them before that resolution. So if that's okay, I will send everybody out an email when they're ready. Hopefully they'll be ready at some point on Wednesday. And I'm willing to stick around Wednesday into the evening if, somebody can only come in the evening or something. We'll make that work. Mary Lou talked to me this afternoon. She reviewed the 2 ambulance contracts. I didn't feel the need for her to come to the meeting tonight just to tell us that she reviewed them. She made one little minor change that she sent to everybody. She is comfortable with them. So I'd like to then, well, did anybody have any questions or thoughts on it before, since we're in discussion? If not, we'll propose a resolution. Yes, Charlotte.
I just had a question about the coverage between the 2 contracts. I know one's for town of Marbletown to be using their services, and one's for the Kerhonkson Accord.
Right.
But Marbletown only lists High Falls as the town they cover, and we have residents in
So-
Stone Ridge. Who covers Stone Ridge then?
Stone Ridge is Marbletown, but within the town boundaries of Rochester, it's not the town of Marbletown, it's the Marbletown First Aid Unit. They have always, their coverage area is the zip code of High Falls area. So they cover that small portion. They cover Stone Ridge. They cover all of the town of Marbletown, a little bit of Rosendale, and a little bit of Rochester. Accord Kerhonkson covers the balance of Rochester and parts of Wawarsing, the Kerhonkson area. So our contract, though, is for ambulance coverage within our own town boundaries.
Okay, because it
So we
says
have to-
specifically High Falls on there. That's why I was
Right,
curious.
because it's the High Falls zip code area of the town of Rochester. And there's a
Stonebridge has
list
a
of,
separate zip code.
there's a list of properties that they have in their ambulance district is established by the Ulster County EMS. So it's the
I follow.
boundaries. Yeah, they call it High Falls in there only because it more or less correlates with the High Falls zip code. And Michael actually has been working with me to, we got all the SBL parcel numbers, and we actually have found a couple holes. There's a couple properties that probably should be listed that are not, and we're going to work towards solving that. But ultimately, it's the same coverage area as has existed in the past. We just ran into a little bit of issues or problems because Marbletown created an ambulance district that the taxpayers are now paying for. We're going to work toward trying to achieve that for 2023, but for 2022, we wanted to make sure that we had coverage. So with this contract, it's a proportional contract based on the value of all the properties in the Marbletown district. And the 12,500 was that proportion. Rosendale is paying a somewhat similar, probably a little bit more amount, because they cover about 400 properties, and we probably cover, do you remember, Michael, was it about 150 properties maybe? Probably in that vicinity.
No.
They've always said 100 homes, but there are other properties other than just residential properties that they cover. So
Okay, no problem.
So the resolution would be to authorize, we'll do two separate resolutions. The first would be to authorize the supervisor to sign the contract between the town of Rochester and Marbletown First Aid Unit for coverage for from January 1, 2022 to December 31, 2022 in the town of Rochester.
Mike, I did have some other questions. So
Okay, let me get a second on the resolution first.
Okay.
Do I have a second on that?
I'll second.
Okay. Okay, Michael, now.
So I noticed we're calling out both BLS, basic life support, and advanced life support. Are both units providing both BLS and ALS?
Marbletown is. I'm going to have to clarify with I listed it for the moment in Kerhonkson. I'm not 100% sure that they are covering ALS. They definitely are covering BLS. What I did is I took basically the same contract. The difference between the two is we have a snow plowing agreement with Kerhonkson that we have always had with them. So I've included that in there. So this resolution is to allow me to send it to them. If they come back with changes that they wish, then I'll come back to the board with any changes.
Okay. And
So-
the only other concern I have with respect to the requirements that they attempt to collect directly from what I assume is the person calling for the ambulance or the insurance company. I just want to make sure it doesn't, because ambulances can be expensive. Some insurance policies won't cover them. I don't want our resolution to become a forcing function for MFA or KFAS to go after somebody and try and make them pay something.
It will not. It's what their own policy is. It's just it allows them, besides, we are allowed under New York state law to fund ambulance districts. What this does is allows them to also collect on their own. How they choose to do it is their own policy. So, so this resolution is essentially allowing us to pay them the amount of money we're paying them for ambulance coverage. And then in return, they're guaranteeing that they will be available for coverage for us. And that's why we put in the quarterly. We used to pay it on a yearly stipend or a yearly voucher. we're doing it quarterly so we can actually track the response rates. And that has been one of the concerns. And in return, Kerhonkson is going to go do a partial paid model. So, did that answer your questions on that?
It did, yeah. And I only had one last thing. I think we stipulate somewhere that there's certain revenues, including donations, that do not count towards the town's
Correct.
contributions. I was just wondering.
No,
if
it's not toward town contributions. We're not requiring them to count any donations they receive as revenue there, because that's kind of arbitrary.
Right. And I was just wondering if somebody wanted to stipulate that it go towards them, to help support the town of Rochester, if that could be a caveat.
A donation to them?
If someone were to donate to Marbletown First Aid Unit and stipulate that they wanted to, go towards the contributions for the town of Rochester, if that would be.
I don't think I could ask Mary Lou. I don't think we legally can do that. And I know if we get a donation, we can't accept a bind. If we get a donation, it goes to our general fund.
Got it.
We can't accept a binding, you must use it for X, Y, Z.
Okay.
We often do, but we can't be required to do it.
Understood. Thank you.
But we did differentiate the donations only because we didn't want to. Donations are a varying thing. They may have a great year and they may have another year that they don't get much. So we didn't really want to count it as an ongoing revenue stream for them.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we have the first resolution for Marbletown and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Okay, so I will transmit that to them, and if they sign it, if they want to make any changes, then I'll bring it back to the board at our February 3rd meeting. Second resolution is to authorize the supervisor to sign the contract between Town of Rochester and Kerhonkson Accord First Aid Squad for ambulance coverage in the KFAS coverage district for the period January 1, 2022 through December 31, 2022. I'll make that motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Any other questions or discussion on that one? Okay, all in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstain? Okay, thank you very much. Sorry it didn't get to you sooner. Mary Lou wanted to review it before we circulated it, and she just ran out of time, and I didn't get it to her till late last week. But it's very similar to the existing contract between us and Marbletown First Aid. Next, I realized our fire district contract had essentially run out last year. This is a carbon copy of the existing contract that we have between them. So I'm asking for authorization to sign the contract between the Accord, Town of Rochester and the Accord Fire District for shared services contract for the period of now I did beginning January 1, 2022, and did not put an end date. We just put an end by either party with 60 days notice. So the resolution could say for the contract beginning January 1, 2022, and we can end it there. Do I have that motion?
I'll make the motion.
I have a second. Okay, I'll second it for discussion. This contract allows us to be able to plow for them. Without this contract, we could not. They hold us harmless if we do any damage to anything while we're plowing their property. In return, they work with the highway superintendent for filling the water truck for cleaning out the street sweeper, for various other functions. This came about because we used to always just plow their parking lot, but there was no agreement between it. Highway Superintendent Spano brought it to our attention that there was no agreement, and we did negotiate an agreement. And this is an expansion that we did in 2020, adding in the services that they provide us for the highway. Jeff and the fire commissioners worked that out. So it's just an extension of the contract, which slipped through all our knowledge and expired in last year in 2021. So are there any other questions? Okay, all in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, short-term rental. Aaron, I got the information from Jeremy that you were asking for. It was in your packet. The highlighted ones in yellow are the properties that are residential. Some of them were 3-family, some of them were apartment. But it looks to me there's 2,400 single family, there's 8 single families with apartments. There's 298 rural residential. What that is properties that are, I believe it's 5 acres or greater, or maybe it's 10 acres or greater. Rural residential with agriculture is the majority of our farms. There's seasonal residential. There's manufactured housing. There's manufactured housing parks. There's multiple residents. There's residents with commercial use, and there's apartments. So ultimately, it appears to me that there's about 2,700 residential properties that would qualify. So,
Well, I added it up because in the law it says dwelling units. It doesn't specify.
right.
Like, and so that number actually comes to 3,238.
2,238?
3.
Oh, 3,238.
Yeah, when I just added up all the ones that you highlighted.
Okay, so, but we would need to remove the 2-family and the 3-family, actually, not the 2-family, but we'd have to remove the 3-family and the apartment and the manufactured housing, the one that's the 13, that's the parks. So that would be minus 32 from whatever number you added up. Jeremy just highlighted everything that was residential.
Mhm.
So, so it's approximately 3,200 then?
Well, so in our law, it says utilizing the total number
Of
of
dwelling units?
dwelling units.
Okay,
It doesn't say they have to be, like,
Okay,
the ones you listed don't qualify as,
understood. So they don't
Okay.
qualify, but we would still count them. So what was that number you said you came up with?
3,200, 3,238.
Okay. So with that being said, and bear in mind, we have about 88 applications under the grandfathering. Does anybody have any feelings one way or the other on what the number of the cap should be then based on that?
The 88 wasn't the total number. That was just new applications in December, correct? For
The 88
grandfathering?
was applications that are potentially eligible for grandfathering. So to be eligible for grandfathering, you had to be operating already prior to the law, or prior to December 31, not prior to the law. You had to be registered with the county, and you had to submit an application and go through the inspection process. So the 88 were the number that had applied to be grandfathered in. I don't believe they've all had their inspection process yet, but the grandfathering will never be greater than those 88. Those were the ones that were operational that applied for the grandfathering status. So they need to be included in our total count, but the cap is going to be for new applications. Now, anything that is owner occupied does not count against the cap. So if you live on the property more than 6 months out of the year, you're not subject to the cap. You can apply and if you qualify, get your permit. So the cap is for non-owner occupied units for 2022.
So a 3%.
Aaron, correct me if I said anything wrong there.
Yeah, a 3%, because I think we're supposed to set a percentage.
We originally had a percentage in the law. We took that out of the law, so we allowed ourselves to do the number as a straight number each year, depending on what we felt at that moment, based on the percentage was a original discussion point that was then removed.
Yeah, it just says utilizing a percentage of the number of housing units. So I think you're right. We don't have to like set a percentage.
We don't have to set a percentage, but we can.
But a ballpark percentage, so of just new permits, so not including the grandfather, because we're not including that number, but we can consider that number. 3% would be 97. So that's sort of in line with what we were saying.
Right.
About like 100.
Would we, yeah, I was gonna say, would we want to round it up to 100 as a, yeah. Does that seem like
thinks about that, but I'm gonna move.
Yeah, we're in discussion and we're not in a resolution format yet. So what are people's feelings on that? 100 being the cap of non-grandfathered.
Yeah, Mike, I'm excited to hear that because there was so much speculation about what it would shake out to be. We're actually, really spot on. Hoping to come in somewhere around there. So that works out pretty good.
Well, we kind of talked about as a round number we started this with the estimation that there were about 200 short-term rentals in the town. I'm not expecting that everybody applied in the grandfathering. I'm also not expecting that everybody who was on that original list, some of those people hadn't operated in months, if not even years, so they probably may have moved away from the idea. So I think for this first year, 100 seems a reasonable number to set.
Have we received applications yet? Not grandfather?
I don't know the answer to that. Aaron, do you know?
I have not talked to the code enforcement office this week. I know that they had started to get new ones.
They called me and asked me if they could take new applications, and I said yes.
Yeah.
I said they absolutely could, and that we would be establishing the cap.
But I don't know the
I
number.
think we shouldn't worry about the number of applications. I think we really need to work with what percentage of housing units do we think is the proper number for short-term rentals in the town.
And are we still gonna, I just want to make sure I follow right. Anyone who's a full-time resident, they're not a part of this cap, which I understand.
Not a full-time resident, you full-time of the property.
Of the property, yes,
Yeah,
that's what I meant.
Yep.
Of
Sorry.
that property.
Yes.
They're exempt from the cap. Are we gonna be able to track that though? They still have to apply, correct?
They still have to apply,
Okay.
absolutely. Anybody who operates a short-term rental has to apply. The grandfathering was a way to recognize people who were doing it, who went through the process to apply. Anybody moving forward can apply for a new permit. It's just the owner occupied are not subject to the cap, the non-owner occupied are. Except that you cannot have more than, I'm trying to remember, is it 2?
Aaron's saying yes.
No permit may hold permits for greater than 2 properties at any given time, 1 owner occupied and 1 non-owner occupied. And the theory on that is you can't be owner occupied on 2 properties. If you're living greater than half the year on one property, you can't be living greater than half the year on another property. It just, the math doesn't work out. So, so the 100 Does the 100 seem appropriate if somebody wants to make that resolution to set the non-owner occupied?
I'll make the resolution.
Okay, set the non-owner occupied cap for 2022 at 100 for short-term rentals. Okay, so I have a resolution from Charlotte. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, any other discussion on that?
I'm just wondering if for next year, for numbers wise, for us to set the cap, is there a way to find out how many long-term rentals we have in town?
Sure.
Just to make a
Well,
percentage so we can
well,
balance the
to
percentage
some
of what's
degree.
rented in town.
I don't know that we'll ever be able to know exactly, but to some degree.
Yeah,
And
obviously it's trying to
also,
be perfectly accurate.
yeah, when we set this number for 2023, we're going to be setting it in August.
Okay.
So people will have the time during this first year of implementing the law. We wanted to do the grandfathering, so we had a rough idea of what we were dealing with in order to make the next number.
Yep, understood.
So,
That was my only other
moving
question.
forward, the cap will be set in August for the following year, so everybody will know plenty of time whether they want to operate one or not. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstain. Next, the assessor's aid. We have, as of yesterday, or actually as of this morning, there were 16 applications on Indeed that had been received. Jeremy really needs somebody in that position in February. What I'd like to know is if the board would like to set up a subcommittee of one other board member or two board members, either one other board member and myself, or two board members to meet with Jeremy to make a recommendation to the board of the top three, like we did with the planning and zoning. It seemed to work really well for that, rather than the board being involved in the whole interview process. Then we have to schedule special meetings. Is there one person that is interested in doing that, or are there two board members? And I would step aside and let two of you handle it however you want to handle it. I do want to have Jeremy involved in it though, because he's going to have to work with the person.
I'd be happy to be one of those people.
Adam, would you and Charlotte want to do it as our, because you are really good on the HR stuff.
I am. I appreciate it. I'm sitting there half hesitantly, only because I'm into my busy hiring season. I did like 8 interviews today.
Okay.
So I'm looking forward to another 16. I'm going to go.
Well,
I'm gonna toss my hat in.
well, what I thought is we could review and take it down to 5 or the top 5 like we did last time and interview those 5.
No, I really am happy to. It'll be
Okay.
it'll be an honor.
So I'm going to step aside from the interview process and let you and Charlotte and Jeremy coordinate that. What I'll do is I'll get the applications out to you guys and let you guys decide who the top 5 are. So I'll make a resolution that the town board establishes assessor's aid interview subcommittee consisting of Councilman Paddock, Councilwoman Smiseth, and Assessor Jeremy Baraka. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstain. Okay. Moving into the next section, there's a number of things that I presented to you. It's all in goal of having discussion on it at our regular meeting. The first, though, the ARPA rule, the federal government came back with a new ruling, one of which is very helpful for everybody. And I don't know if anybody else was able to watch the Association of Towns attorney on Friday did a brief presentation on it. I did share the video of that with everybody today. It came out this afternoon. If you want to watch it, it's about 50 minutes and it's highly entertaining. It's Sarah Brancatella, the attorney from Association of Towns, who just watching her in general is always entertaining with her energy. But one of the big changes is the town municipalities can now claim up to $10 million of lost revenue without any documentation of lost revenue. You no longer have to calculate using the very, very complicated formula. I'm sure they got a ton of questions on how to calculate it and finally gave up. The caveats are it must be used for ordinary government expenses, which in Sarah's opinion is just about everything. Government operational expenses. The things we cannot use it toward, we cannot use it to pay off debt. We cannot use it to pay off pensions. We cannot use it to put in fund balance. We couldn't just collect that money and say, we're going to put it in fund balance. What it does do, though, is allows us the opportunity, rather than making the rescue squads, we already plan on putting some of that money toward the rescue squad payments. They no longer have to do this massive accounting that it goes to COVID-related expenses. We can simply encumber the money into our budget and just pay them out next year, or excuse me, this year, in the 4 equal payments that we agreed to. And it makes it much easier on them in that they don't have to do all the reporting back to us of utilizing the money for COVID. Otherwise, they would have to track that it was utilized for COVID. And Sarah has said, adamantly, do not even try to do your calculations. Just if you want to take the money to pay off your expenses, do it. So I'm going to ask for a resolution when we meet next Thursday. Just essentially the original resolution said that we were doing it under section such and such of the ARPA law. We're now going to change that resolution to just say we're encumbering it as lost revenue to be encumbered in our budget. And we can do the same for the playground equipment as well. And what it does is it makes our accounting back to the federal government significantly easier and better. So it doesn't change the purpose of what we're using it for. It makes our reporting so much simpler. And that's the major change that they did. There are some other minor changes, but that one is, and the Association of Towns will be coming out with a guidance document. They just haven't developed it yet exactly on how to deal with all this reporting, which is due the end of April, our first reporting. So that was the big update. The request for a resolution on the opposition of creating a countywide landfill. This was a copy of the resolution that the town of Ulster adopted in October. The Supervisors Association took the opinion recently that we as a body were opposed to it. Jim Quigley, the supervisor of Ulster, shared that resolution. If we want to adopt a similar, it's a memorializing resolution. It has no bearing, no standing. It's just sending our opinion. If anybody feels that we should or shouldn't do this, let's talk about it at our next meeting, and we can draft our own resolution if we so choose. I'm just bringing it to your attention. And then the 3 local laws are just ongoing things. The Recreation Commission, we changed our Youth Commission name to Recreation Commission, and Mary Lou pointed out to us that there is language in the state law about exactly how that should be done. I copied the bulk of Hyde Park's law in that proposal, and it would just be a memorializing to actually create the Recreation Commission by statute. The solid waste littering, I sent you an example of the existing solid waste. I sent you an example of a standalone littering law, and I sent you an example of a combination of amending the solid waste to include littering. This is the same document that I've sort of circulated for a few months now. I just want to get us moving forward on it. And then the accessory dwellings, Aaron and Michael, that is word for word what was taken out of the ZRC's recommendation. Marbletown also had just recently adopted one, and then they just recently, or they're in the process of making some changes. It's a little bit different. I was gonna also circulate that if anybody wants to sort of compare the two, but it's something, I think it's one of the things that came out of the ZRC that should be high on our list of getting it done. So it's kind of a gentle nudge from me on those three to say, let's talk about them. So if anybody is ready to do any of them, we can certainly present them at our February 3rd meeting to then schedule public hearings, referrals, all that. So it's more just informational to say, what do you guys think about this? And that's all I have. We do need to go into executive session. Does anybody else have any other topics they want to add to the agenda tonight before we go into executive session? Okay, so I'm going to then make a motion that the town board enters into executive session at 9:52 p.m. And it'll be twofold: for the purposes of discussion of candidates for appointment to various town of Rochester boards and commissions. And the second topic would be for discussion of about the employment of a particular person.
Second.
Okay, I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstain. Okay. Kate, thank you very much for sticking it out tonight through all those interviews. I'll get the rest of the resolutions for you.
Okay.
So, and
Thank
I'm
you very
gonna-
much.
I'm going to stop
good evening.
the,
Good night.
thank you.